After the improv show in which Madame Spatzel dazzled alongside talented performer Audrey, whom Kevin had seen swimming nude at the Beverly Hills hotel pool, Kevin got a call from Olivia to tell him that Margot's student film, which involved Margot shooting a tiger after it mauled multiple crew members, had been released. Animal rights groups as well as animal-loving celebrities were now targeting Margot, which Kevin knew could spell trouble for their upcoming Cleopatra movie. Kevin hung up with Olivia and rubbed his forehead. Dealing with the fallout from Margot's student film was now going to have to be his top priority. He headed back into the auditorium where the crowd had thinned out. He approached Madame Spatzel, who was still reveling in the audience's feedback. "Madame Spatzel," he said, embracing her, "you were incredible up there. Aren't you glad you gave it a shot?" "Yes, I was incredible," Madame Spatzel replied. "Not at all embarrassing like when other people do improv." She flounced away to chat with the other troupe members. After she left, Kevin turned to Lily. "What happened to Audrey? Did you get to ask her about Hazel?" "She disappeared after the show," Lily replied, discouraged. "Maybe you'll get another chance to talk to her?" she added hopefully. "Yeah, maybe," Kevin replied, though he had no idea when they'd get another opportunity. The only other person in the troupe that they knew was Ryder, and Kevin certainly didn't trust him to give them accurate information. "Let's head back to the hotel," he said to Lily. "It's been a long day." Lily blinked. "The car auction really was earlier today. We were shot at today. That feels like 2 years ago." "Yeah, no more adventures today," Kevin concurred. "Let's go get some sleep." Madame Spatzel returned from her conversation with the other performers, brimming with excitement. "We're going to a speakeasy that's hidden behind the guest bathroom of Robert De Niro's house. You must join us," she demanded. Not a chance, but Kevin tactfully replied, "You go have your fun. Get to know your new friends. Lily and I have a date with room service." "Suit yourself," Madame Spatzel replied before bouncing back to the group. Lily whispered to Kevin, "Please get me out of here before someone tries to get me to participate in anything else." Once they got back to the hotel, Kevin and Lily tore into the most luxurious room service cheeseburgers ever made, while Kevin filled Lily in on his call with Olivia. "I know people always joke about Hollywood types being insane," Lily said after Kevin explained Margot's film, "but an endangered tiger murdering people on a film set doesn't do much to disprove the theory." "Margot's not a bad person," Kevin replied with a sigh. He truthfully had struggled to reconcile his feelings about the whole ordeal. He was loyal to Margot, but he had an affinity for animals, especially since his advancing levels had enabled him to communicate with them. "She definitely needs people around her to rein in her ideas," he continued. "She didn't have that as a student." "So what are you going to do?" Lily asked. "The first step is talking to Margot to see what her plan is," Kevin replied. "I want to help her any way I can, but we also have a huge movie with a lot of jobs at stake. I won't allow her to jeopardize it. I can't condone what she did as a student, and I need to know she's willing to put in the work to make it right." "I think that's very fair," Lily replied. "Unfortunately," Kevin continued, "I think that probably means it's the right time for you to return to Chicago. This is going to take up all of my time for the foreseeable future, and I still have to figure out what to do about the Upper Realm. My quest to find the secret of the Lumiere brothers' film and the Upper Realm portal has to be resolved as soon as possible." "I understand," said Lily. "It's time for me to get back anyway. We'll hold down the fort, but the mayor of Chicago should be in Chicago." "I hope Margot is as committed to taking responsibility as you are," Kevin said with a smile. He leaned in and kissed her. "Kevin," Lily said after they parted, "I just ate a cheeseburger smothered in onions and barbecue sauce." "Funny you should mention that," Kevin responded, leaning in for another kiss, "because I just realized that onions and barbecue sauce are my favorite flavors." They laughed as they tumbled into bed. The next morning, Lily left on an early flight to Chicago while Kevin and Madame Spatzel met with Margot down at the hotel pool. Kevin and Margot sipped on coffee while Madame Spatzel drank from a carafe of Bloody Marys. "So how are you doing, Margot?" Kevin asked. Margot slowly took off her oversized sunglasses as if she were recovering from a hangover. "Not great, Kevin," she replied. She removed her blazer and turned it around, revealing a splatter of red paint across the back. One of the animal rights activists had cornered Margot and made his anger known with a balloon filled with paint. Margot continued, "My new assistant quit. My agent told me I'd been dropped from multiple projects I was up for. And I keep getting hateful messages on Twitter and Instagram from Taylor Swift fans who know about my short film." "I believe it's now called X," Madame Spatzel interjected as she sipped more of her Bloody Mary. "I'm not calling it that," Margot replied. "I'm really sorry you're going through this, Margot," Kevin said earnestly. "Is there anything we can do? As your friends," he emphasized. "Just the fact that you're still talking to me is more than I can say for many of my supposed friends," Margot replied. "People are treating me like I have a contagious disease. Cancel culture always comes for the stars who shine the brightest." Kevin bit his tongue while Madame Spatzel replied, "That I don't understand. I like you more now." Margot looked over at Madame Spatzel, who had previously worn a dead polar bear to a Sundance party. Maybe not the best endorsement, but Margot was going to take what she could get. "I appreciate that, Madame Spatzel. Thank you." "We do have to talk about Cleopatra," Kevin said gently. "This has caused such a frenzy that PETA and the ASPCA have now combined to form one huge animal rights group, and they are going to protest any project that you're part of. We need snakes for the movie, and they famously worshipped cats in ancient Egypt. They might be using animals while filming, and possibly abuse them." "I only work with real snakes," Madame Spatzel added. "Fake snakes are a deal breaker for me." I get it, Margot said, waving them off. She was clearly overwhelmed by the mess she had to clean up. "I'm not trying to take you down with me, but I don't know what to do." "Start by making a public apology," Kevin suggested. "My colleague Olivia can help you write it. Then contact the animal rights group's leaders." "That shouldn't be too hard considering they follow me everywhere now." Margot replied, "Ask them what they want from you to make amends. Anything short of hurting yourself or others, you do it. No questions asked." Kevin continued. Margot looked like a child on the verge of a tantrum. "But Kevin, what if they ask me to do something really awful, like do community service or smile in a picture?" "That's probably exactly what they will ask of you," Kevin said, starting to sense that he was really going to have to give Margot a kick in the pants. "Whatever it is, you're going to have to ask yourself if appeasing them is so impossible for you that you'd rather sacrifice directing Cleopatra over it. Because that's your choice." Margot stewed in her seat, knowing that she had fully backed herself into a corner, and Kevin wasn't going to let this slide. "Fine," she declared. "I'll talk to the animal rights cartel. They're probably right outside the hotel waiting to throw paint and rotten meat at me." "I am so jealous," Madame Spatzel replied. "I really do hope you can work it out with them quickly," Kevin said as Margot rose from her seat. "We have to push forward with Cleopatra pre-production. We'll do what we can without you, but I want you back on board as soon as possible." Margot at least seemed reassured by Kevin's determination to keep her on the project. With a bit more resolve, she replied, "Thank you, Kevin. I'll get it done." After she left, Madame Spatzel, having just finished her half-gallon Bloody Mary, pulled over Margot's half-filled coffee mug and dumped a flask of whiskey into it. "You were very good with her," Madame Spatzel said while taking a sip. "We're lucky you don't need to manage me like that." Kevin took a coffee to avoid answering. "So what are we going to do?" Madame Spatzel asked. "We have no other choice," Kevin replied. "We don't know if or when we'll get Margot back. Starting right now, we have to learn how to direct a $500 million movie." Kevin tried to keep his troubles to himself, and surely Madame Spatzel wasn't the person to reveal that with the Cleopatra movie falling apart because of Margot's animal rights issues, and with his quest to find the Lumiere brothers' film in jeopardy, he was worried that his empire was about to crumble, and he was going to endanger the fate of the Foundation as the pinnacle, he knew in his heart, was nearer than ever to an attack. Kevin dealt with public fallout from the release of Margot's student film, in which a rare white tiger mauled multiple crew members as the cameras continued to roll. Knowing this would spell trouble for their Cleopatra feature, Kevin told Margot she had to step away from the film until she made amends with the animal rights groups PETA and the ASPCA. But with pre-production on the film already underway, this meant that, in Margot's absence, Kevin would have to take over directing duties. Kevin and Madame Spatzel showed up to the Eminence Studios lot for their first day of Cleopatra pre-production without Margot. The animal rights organizations announced Margot's community service commitment that morning during a press conference. She would be cleaning the cages of the big cat section of the LA Zoo until she learned to respect the animal. Following the press conference, PETA and the ASPCA released a photo featuring grinning animal rights activists posing next to Margot, attempting a smile, though it was clear in her eyes that she was terrified that word might have spread and the animals would get their revenge on her. Back on the Eminence lot, Kevin once again felt the pull of the upper realm. It was frustrating for him to be on the lot hid so many secrets while he knew that overseeing a $500 million film production would mean he would not have any time to search for them. He wanted to check out the locked editing bays, and he had a feeling that the decoy Lumiere film canister isn't the only item of interest hidden in President Helen O'Day's office. Maybe we'll make it through this day quickly, Kevin thought hopefully. The first order of business for Kevin and Madame Spatzel as stand-in directors was a casting session for Arsinoe, Cleopatra's younger sister. Screenwriter Sabrina Montgomery's rewrites had gone a long way toward improving the character. What was once a one-note role was now going to require a powerhouse actress. Kevin was nervous to have Madame Spatzel in on the casting sessions for such an important role. He valued her input and needed to know she could have chemistry with the actress who would play her sister, but she was prone to rejecting people, especially other women whom she felt threatened by. As they sat on the couches in the production office, Madame Spatzel said, "So we are finding the girl to play my servant, yes?" "Your younger sister," Kevin corrected her. "That's what I said," Madame Spatzel replied. "Okay," Kevin pressed on. Cleopatra and Arsinoe did end up going to war against each other, so maybe Madame Spatzel's prickly nature would work in this case. Kevin called in an assistant and asked her to send in the first actress. He was surprised to see that their first audition was Cassandra, one of the sympathy flower girls Kevin had met at Soho House. "Hello, Cassandra. Nice to see you again." Kevin politely greeted her, though the sympathy girl's detached, dreamy presence had always unnerved him to the degree that even with his excellent sense of character and his ability to see into the hearts of those around him, he could not get a read on their motivations and intentions. "I am Cassandra Johansson, auditioning for the role of Arsinoe," she replied. It was like she was responding with an automated message. Right," Kevin replied. "You can start whenever you're ready, Cassandra." To Kevin's surprise, it looked like Cassandra's eyes came alive as she began her lines. Her performance probably wouldn't blow anyone away, but compared to the robotic pull-string doll she normally sounded like, Kevin might as well have been looking at Meryl Streep. It was almost disarming to hear the inflection in her voice and see the emotion on her face, when previously her only setting had been monotone and a frozen smile. But just as quickly, Cassandra finished the scene and her eyes glazed over once again. Kevin was taken aback by this noticeable change, but pushed forward. Again, he had to wonder why he could not connect to Cassandra and the other sympathy girls as if they were real human beings. "That was great, Cassandra. Thank you for coming in," Kevin said as a courtesy. "I like your sweatshirt," Cassandra said back in her usual breezy monotone. Thank you," Kevin replied, thrown off by the random compliment. "It really brings out your eyes," Cassandra continued, "like a deep ocean holding many secrets." "Thanks, I get that a lot," Kevin answered, completely weirded out. "Does my outfit bring out my eyes?" Madame Spatzel eagerly asked while smoothing out her bright orange dress. Cassandra looked at Madame Spatzel in confusion like she hadn't even noticed her there. Yes, of course, she forced out like the words were brand new to her. She then looked back to Kevin and, returning to her smooth monotone, she said, Please let me know if there's anything else I can do for you. I mean, anything. We'll be sure to call you if we need to do a screen test. Kevin rushed through his words with the discomfort that only came over him when he was in the company of the sympathy girls. Thanks for coming in. Once she left, Kevin turned to Madame Spatzel. That was weird, right? He asked. Yes, Madame Spatzel replied. She said my dress brought out my eyes like she didn't even mean it. Once again, Madame Spatzel was proving to be oblivious to the eerie nature of everything and everyone related to sympathy. Kevin wished Margot was here. He had heard of actors using any means possible to get roles, but he sincerely hoped that Cassandra's inappropriate flirtation wasn't going to be a regular occurrence. Hollywood was full of actresses who played up to producers and directors, but Kevin knew that word had spread quickly about his devotion to Lily. Kevin's reputation was that his eyes would never light on anyone other than his beloved wife. Kevin signaled to the assistant who escorted in the next actress, another sympathy girl. Kevin had never been formally introduced to her before, but it was still unsettling when she announced, in the same monotone as Cassandra, I'm Penelope Reardon, auditioning for the role of Arsinoe. Didn't these women at least know Madame Spatzel? Kevin wondered. But Madame Spatzel seemed completely unfazed by their rigid introductions, as if she had become desensitized to their distant, aloof way of speaking. Thank you, Penelope, Kevin replied. You can begin. Just as with Cassandra, Penelope came alive when she started acting out the scene. Her performance was still nothing Kevin was amazed by, but unlike 2 minutes ago, this seemed like a real person to him. Kevin also couldn't help but notice that unlike everything else the sympathy girl said in perfect synchronization, Cassandra and Penelope had completely different readings of the scene. They had their own cadence, pacing, and their own personalities. As Penelope finished scene, Kevin felt a wave of sadness as she resumed her frozen state, like an animatronic character on a Disneyland ride after the train had passed. Great job, Penelope. Thank you for your time. We'll be making our decision soon. Penelope now looked at Kevin with eyes that somehow held more intensity despite still looking drugged. I can also dance if you'd like me to show you, she said in her dreamy tone that now had a suggestive edge to it. That won't be necessary for this role, Kevin abruptly replied, but thank you for letting us know. Maybe you should consider seeing Penelope dance, Kevin, Madame Spatzel interjected. I've seen her interpretive pole dance at the Sympathy House. It's riveting. It doesn't need to be just for the role, Penelope continued, her voice becoming increasingly sultry as she stayed focused on Kevin. I'm very flexible. You can do whatever you want with me. That's great to know, Penelope, Kevin replied, not even able to make eye contact with her. We'll be in touch. Penelope reluctantly exited the room. At this point, Kevin was dreading the rest of the session. Are any of these actresses going to remain professional, he wondered, and maybe even show some personality other than when reading the lines? No such luck with the next actress, a girl named Daisy. Kevin had never seen her before, but at this point he knew a sympathy girl when he saw one. Her performance was the best they had seen so far, bringing more layers and complexity than the first two actresses. Kevin probably would have considered her if he wasn't still thoroughly creeped out by the now predictable way she seemed to return to her robotic manners after finishing the scene. Thank you for coming in, Kevin said, praying this one would just leave the room. We'll be in touch. As soon as Kevin sensed Daisy's hesitation, he braced himself. How exactly will you be in touch? Daisy asked suggestively. We'll contact your agent, Kevin replied, not even able to hide the annoyance in his voice at this point. Daisy took a step forward. Looking up through her eyelashes, she said, You could touch me directly if you want. Kevin rarely lost his temper, but he was also rarely sexually harassed. He was about to get much less polite with the actress when she turned to Madame Spatzel and asked, Will you be in touch too? I hope so. Madam Spatzel, who had become increasingly annoyed as Kevin got all the attention, abruptly sat up. She gave Kevin a look that suggested she would be open to considering the offer. Now speaking to them both, Daisy said, "You can get in touch with me later. For now, you can just look." She slowly started unbuttoning her top, as Kevin worried that perhaps he had sent Lily back to Chicago too soon. It seemed that all of the actresses from Sympathy knew that he was alone in the city and directing an enormous movie, and they all wanted to get a part at any cost. With Margot temporarily off the Cleopatra movie to do community service at the Los Angeles Zoo, Kevin and Madam Spatzel were overseeing the casting session for the role of Cleopatra's sister, Arsinoe. The first few auditions were all from Sympathy Flower Girls, and though they each seemed normal and alert during their performances, their demeanor was otherwise the creepy, glazed-over monotone that Kevin had come to expect. They also became increasingly flirtatious with Kevin, concluding with the most recent actress unbuttoning her shirt. "Stop!" Kevin exclaimed. Daisy, the actress, paused her unbuttoning just as her cleavage was beginning to show. "Don't you want to see what I could bring to the role?" she pouted. "No," Kevin forcefully replied. It wasn't just that any situation like this was a threat to his marriage, but it astonished him that there was a clear lack of work ethic among the Sympathy girls. Or was it that they had been told by their agents and managers that this was how they should get a role? Kevin had enough of the actresses coming on to him. With this one trying to disrobe in front of him, it had officially gone too far. Clearly, he was going to have to nip this trend in the bud. He stormed out into the hallway and was shocked by what he saw. 24 actresses lined either side of the hallway, all silent with rigid posture and with the trademark Sympathy glazed over eyes. They all creepily turned their heads in unison to face Kevin. Kevin shook off his discomfort and announced to the group, "Excuse me, everyone. I appreciate all of you coming in to audition today, but due to the behavior of some of the other actresses, I feel it's necessary for me to make a disclaimer. I am happily married and will not under any circumstances stray outside my marriage." Madam Spatzel peeked her head out into the hallway. "I, however, am unmarried and have European sensibilities when it comes to the ways of love and romance," she declared. "No," Kevin replied. "Other producers and directors may cast their movies this way, but that's not how we're doing things here. Anyone who tries to use anything other than their acting ability to secure this role will be disqualified from contention. We are," he looked at Madam Spatzel while emphasizing, "both off limits." While Kevin would think that needing to make a statement like this would normally inspire embarrassment in at least a few of the actresses, his speech did not seem to have any sort of emotional impact on anyone in the hall. In synchronized robotic monotone, they all replied, "Yes, Kevin. Off limits, Kevin." "Thank you," Kevin replied, disturbed but sincerely hoping that this would mark the end of the sexual advances. Back inside the room, Madam Spatzel rolled her eyes. "You didn't have to be so hard on them, Kevin. They were just being friendly." Kevin was becoming increasingly troubled by how little Madam Spatzel seemed to be rattled by the concerning behavior of the Sympathy members. He had no choice but to start being more straightforward with her. They weren't being friendly, Madam Spatzel. They were being manipulative. To Kevin's delight, the next actress turned out to be Audrey, with whom Madam Spatzel had recently performed improv. "Audrey," Kevin said cheerfully, "it's great to see you again. What a nice surprise." "I'm so excited to have gotten this audition," Audrey said earnestly. "Like I said, Madam Spatzel, your performance in Chains of Desire was one of the things that inspired me to pursue more dramatic roles. To be able to work with you directly would be an honor." "Yes, it would be an honor for you," Madam Spatzel agreed. "I picked up your specialty of improv very quickly, but it will be helpful for you to be able to study me." "I couldn't agree more," Audrey replied diplomatically. "You can start whenever you're ready," Kevin said. Audrey launched into her performance, and to say she was the standout thus far would be an understatement. The charisma she displayed during the improv show easily translated to the scripted scene. She disappeared into the role and made unexpected choices with her line deliveries. She stayed true to the tone of the script while making the character her own. Could she be leveled? Kevin wondered. Kevin had never considered that acting prowess could be the result of levels, but watching Audrey, it started to make sense to him. Meryl Streep certainly had a command over language and a capacity to disguise herself that surpassed regular human abilities. Kevin knew his own levels worked and he could recognize them in his foes and when battling enemies, but there were many things about levels that still escaped him. He knew that gaining entry to the upper realm would provide more answers, and it was just one of the reasons why that quest was so important. As Kevin thought more ways other than warfare, he noted that adaptability and talent for camouflage would definitely be beneficial to all the organizations that utilized levels. It occurred to Kevin that some of the best actors in the world might not be on Broadway or in Hollywood, but they could be working for the CIA or even the Pinnacle. Kevin already knew he himself was a great actor. He had seamlessly performed the role of Kenneth Wilkinson at Radiance. Should I play a role in the movie? Kevin wondered. He put that thought aside as Audrey concluded her audition. Much to his surprise, Madame Spatzel immediately rose from her seat and applauded. Kevin would have thought that Madame Spatzel might be threatened by anyone who seemed like they could possibly steal the limelight from her, but on the contrary, she seemed overjoyed by the quality of Audrey's performance. We need someone powerful and impressive in this role if they are to convincingly play someone related to me, Madame Spatzel announced. I could already feel during our time on the improv stage that you were like a little sister to me. That is such an incredible thing for you to say, Audrey gushed. I truly did feel a special connection with you when we performed together. Kevin was delighted that Madame Spatzel would require no convincing when it came to Audrey. I couldn't agree more with Madame Spatzel, Kevin said. Your grasp on the character and your unique take on the role is head and shoulders above the rest. The role is yours if you want it. Will you join our production of Cleopatra? Audrey's face flushed red. Oh my God, yes. I don't know how to thank you. This is one of the best days of my life. The only way to thank us is to bring this same energy and passion to set every day, Kevin replied. This film is going to be a huge undertaking, but with the type of talent we're assembling, this is going to be a career-defining project for everyone. You can count on me, Audrey insisted. I am so grateful. I'm going to immediately study more on Arsinoe. I'll be ready for anything you throw at me. Good, because I tend to throw things, Madame Spatzel replied. I love your spirit, Kevin told Audrey. We'll send the contract to your agent and get this deal closed ASAP. Kevin paused, then added, I should mention, I think I've seen you before. At the Beverly Hills Hotel pool? He didn't want to include that she had been nude at the time, but if Audrey had any awareness that Kevin had seen her naked, she didn't show any embarrassment. Oh, my morning swims, she laughed casually. I love starting my day there. I'm so energized by the Hollywood history that echoes around that hotel. And water is so cleansing for the soul, don't you think? I couldn't agree more, Kevin replied. Audrey's response seemed so innocent, but he couldn't help but wonder if there was more behind her reasons for choosing to swim nude in a pool with no guaranteed privacy. But he pushed the thought out of his mind as he said, Thank you for coming in today, Audrey. I'm so appreciative to both of you, Audrey replied. As she headed for the door, she added, I can't wait to call my husband. As she left, Kevin collapsed back onto the couch. He was so relieved to be done with this part of the casting process. They landed an amazing actress who also happened to be the only one who didn't try to use any Hollywood games to secure the role. She even looked the part. Thank God, I don't have to deal with any more of those sympathy girls, Kevin thought. Other than to send them home, of course. Kevin walked into the hallway and taking a deep breath announced, Unfortunately, we've made our decision on the role, so we'll be canceling the rest of the auditions. Thank you all for coming in, and I wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors. Once again, the rows of sympathy girls didn't respond with the frustration and disappointment that one might expect. They simply replied, Yes, Kevin, and like a battalion of zombie soldiers rose in unison and stayed in single file as they walked out of the building. Glad to be done with that, Kevin thought as he watched their parade with a bit of astonishment. Around the corner, Audrey was dialing her cell. After a moment, she squealed, "Baby, I got the part, can you believe it?" On the other end of the line, sympathy leader Lance Reeves drew a sly smile.
"Of course. I believed you could do it. I'm so proud of you."
"You were right about Kevin," Audrey continued. "He's smart, very perceptive."
"I'm glad you'll be working closely with him,"
Lance responded.
"And with Madame Spatzel. She's becoming an important member of our group."
"You were right to suggest I build a connection with her," Audrey replied. "I'll be home soon so we can celebrate. Love you." After she hung up, Lance put down his phone. His smile widened. Lance's plot was moving forward just as he planned. With Margot doing community service at the Los Angeles Zoo, Kevin and Madame Spatzel oversaw the casting session for the role of Cleopatra's sister, Arsinoe. Most of the actresses were glassy-eyed sympathy girls, all of who came on to Kevin in increasingly suggestive ways. Finally, Audrey, with whom Madame Spatzel had just performed improv, came in and knocked her audition out of the park, and Kevin was relieved that she was also the only contender who didn't have the trademark sympathy demeanor. Kevin offered her the part on the spot, after which Audrey excitedly called her husband, who turned out to be sympathy leader Lance Reeves. With the casting of the critical role of Cleopatra's sister Arsinoe, pre-production for the movie was proceeding smoothly. With Margot still on community service duty, Kevin and Madame Spatzel needed to update Eminence Studios president Helen O'Day on their progress. Helen proved she would continue to exert her power over Kevin, once again making him wait outside her office despite their scheduled appointment. Kevin was content with waiting. It took much more than that to get under his skin, but Madame Spatzel wasn't so patient. "This is ridiculous that we are waiting," Madame Spatzel complained. "Would you make any of my contemporaries wait? Anne Hathaway, Emma Stone, Jennifer Lawrence? They do not wait." It didn't escape Kevin's notice that all of Madame Spatzel's contemporaries were Oscar winners. Helen's condescending assistant Ricard was on a call. "I don't care if he's out of town," he said in a bored tone over the phone. "The King of England postponed his coronation to make time for Helen O'Day. But you think she's going to move her schedule around for Julia Roberts?" He listened for a moment and then replied, "Glad you agree. If you are too incompetent to secure a private jet to get him here, we'll make the call to borrow Air Force One. The president owes Helen a favor." He hung up and finally acknowledged Kevin and Madame Spatzel. "Can I offer you some water, coffee?" "I'll take a whiskey," Madame Spatzel answered without a hint of irony. "You're my kind of actress," Ricard replied. He left his desk and shortly returned with 2 tumblers of whiskey, handing one to Madame Spatzel and intending to clink glasses with her before drinking the other one himself. Madame Spatzel took both tumblers and downed them in quick succession. "You knew to bring 2, Madame Spatzel said to Ricard appreciatively. "You are a good assistant." Thanks," Ricard replied. He wasn't used to Helen's guest getting the upper hand on him. Ricard was slightly deflated by the time he returned to his desk and told Kevin and Madame Spatzel, "Helen will see you now." Inside the office, Helen was eager to plump the egos of her guests. "Our producer and our star," she said while giving air kisses to both of them. "Have a seat." She gestured to an elegant sitting area in the corner of her enormous office. After they had settled themselves, she asked, "How's the project going?" "Well, as you know," Kevin began, "Margot is still doing her community service for the animal rights groups. They have her cleaning the tiger cages at the LA Zoo, and we've been told she's halfway through her quota." "Quota?" Helen asked. "Doesn't she just have to do a certain amount of hours?" The animal rights groups decided that due to the severity of her transgression, her community service will be measured not in hours, but in weight of, well, tiger droppings. Kevin replied. Helen took a moment to let that sink in. Well, anyway, she continued, trying to push the thought away. Hopefully she'll return soon. What have you accomplished in the meantime? Sabrina's rewrites have been fantastic, so the script is really in good shape, Kevin responded. And we've made great progress on casting. Madame Spatzel is our Cleopatra, as you know, and we've cast a great actress to play her sister Arsinoe. She's an up-and-comer named Audrey Galanis, a true diamond in the rough, just like Madame Spatzel was before Chains of Desire. Imagining it, but he sensed a flicker of recognition on Helen's face when he said Audrey's name. However, she responded, I've never heard of her, but as you mentioned, you clearly have an eye for undiscovered talent. Have you decided on a Mark Antony? Kevin glanced sideways at Madame Spatzel and shifted in his seat. We've narrowed it down to a few options, he began. Why not Ryder Vance? Helen interrupted. He and Madame Spatzel had great chemistry in Chains of Desire. Why fix what isn't broken? Madame Spatzel looked eagerly at Kevin. She'd be all too happy to be cast alongside her boyfriend, or whatever term they were calling each other. Their relationship hadn't yet gotten to the point of being named. With both women on board, Kevin didn't have a reason to veto Ryder. He couldn't exactly say that the guy creeped him out. We thought we'd do our job by bringing you options, Kevin replied, but if you're on board for Ryder, then I'm happy to go with him. Kevin could see on Helen's face that she could tell she just won a small battle. I'd like to keep pre-production moving, and we'd be lucky to have him, she said briskly. The last major role we need is Julius Caesar. Felicity submitted Otto Lang, but he's all wrong for the part. We need an emperor, not a guy who reeks of middle management. I have a suggestion on that front, Kevin countered. Eli Townsend. He's due for a comeback, and I've been watching some of his old films. He brings the level of commitment and intensity we need. Well, I'd agree with you if this was 15 years ago, Helen replied. But he was never the same after his meltdown on The Last Traitor. He never turned out a good performance again, not to mention, he makes Russell Crowe seem sweet by comparison. Someone like that isn't worth the trouble if they're not bringing the goods. It is lucky for everyone that I bring the goods, but am also very easy to work with, Madame Spatzel interjected. Kevin and Helen let the comment go unacknowledged. I get what you're saying, Helen, Kevin resumed, but like you said, I'm good with talent. If I can oversee breaking someone like Madame Spatzel into the Hollywood big time, why not let me oversee a comeback? Helen pondered for a moment. I'll let you take a chance on him, she decided, but he probably still has a massive ego despite no one wanting to work with him for at least 5 years. And he's not getting this role without an audition. If you can find him quickly and have him agree to audition, I'll give him a shot. If not, we're moving on. That's fair, Kevin replied. Thanks for taking the time today, Helen, he said while rising from his seat. We'll keep you updated. I'll be keeping an eye on you, Helen responded. She always has to say something to keep me on my toes, Kevin thought. On their way out of Helen's office, they passed Ricard's desk, on which he had another tumbler of whiskey. Another one ready for me? Madame Spatzel quickly downed the drink. You are excellent at your job. Ricard stared after them as they walked away, at a loss for how to react to one of the rare people even more self-absorbed than he was. Once they returned to the Beverly Hills Hotel, Kevin decided to do a deeper study of Eli Townsend's movies. If Eli was as difficult a personality as Helen claimed, Kevin wanted to be as prepared as possible before approaching him. Kevin started with some of his older movies. Eli had the type of old Hollywood presence rarely seen since the likes of Marlon Brando and Katharine Hepburn. With each passing film, Kevin became more convinced that they had to cast him as their Caesar. Kevin also noticed that Eli had the same stuntman for all of his movies. Maybe his stuntman would have some insight into how to approach him, Kevin thought. Kevin then watched The Last Traitor, the movie that sent Eli into a crazed spiral. He played an assassin who slowly descended into madness, his darkest role yet. His unhinged, gripping performance won him an Oscar, but the rumor was that his method of acting became so unbearable on set that his co-stars began to fear him, and the production team was eventually forced to film him separately and splice him into the scenes later. No one saw him for 2 years after that, and rumors swirled of a hiatus in either a monastery in Nepal or a psychiatric hospital in New Mexico. But one thing was for certain. Once he returned, he was never the same actor again. Kevin watched in awe the change that had come over Eli. His performances were either flat or forced. He didn't command attention like he once did. But news of his on-set outbursts also lessened. Did his mental health rehabilitation rob him of his genius? Kevin wondered. But Kevin also noticed that Eli's longtime stuntman was no longer credited on his movies. What happened to him? Kevin asked himself. He Googled the stuntman Byron Mathers and found nothing on him after Eli's meltdown. No more credits. Not even any social media accounts. Kevin found an old picture of Byron and Eli posing together at a red carpet premiere. Stuntmen usually look similar to the actor they were portraying, but Byron and Eli could have been identical twins. Kevin went back to watching Eli's most recent movie. There was no stuntman credited for the role at all. Eli was doing his own stunts. Odd for a man to start taking on that work at age 60, Kevin thought. The performance was as terrible as Eli's other most recent movies, and yet the stunts remained just as well executed. The actor doing these stunts was no novice. Finally, it clicked. It wasn't Eli turning in poor performances after his meltdown. It was Byron. Kevin and Madame Spatzel were making progress on casting for Cleopatra in Margot's absence. With Audrey Galanis cast as Arsinoe and Ryder Vance, despite Kevin's reluctance, attached to play Mark Antony, the only major role left was Julius Caesar. Eminent Studios president Helen O'Day cautioned against Kevin's first choice of aging actor Eli Townsend. Eli was known for being a terror on set. Kevin watched Eli's movies to try to understand what had happened to him and realized that his last few years of bad performances were not being given by him, but were the work of his doppelganger stuntman Byron Mathers. Once Kevin realized that stunt Byron Mathers had been impersonating Eli Townsend in his most recent roles, Kevin immediately called Jericho. "Jericho," Kevin said into the phone, "what do you know about Byron Mathers?"
Not much,
Jericho responded.
He was a high-ranking member of the Stuntmen's Guild until he went missing a few years ago. No one knows what happened to him.
"I think I do," Kevin replied. "I think Eli Townsend is the one who actually went missing, and Byron has assumed his identity." On the other end of the line, Jericho took this in.
I guess that would explain why Eli's performances tanked in his last few movies. Byron always wanted to cross over into acting, but he was far better at choreographing, executing stunts than emoting and delivering lines.
"That's for sure," Kevin agreed, having watched the lackluster movie starring a supposed Oscar winner. "Come to the hotel," Kevin instructed. "We're going to pay Eli a visit." While waiting for Kevin called Felicity Dufour to ask for Eli's address, or rather the address person pretending to be Eli.
Why?
Felicity asked, clearly confused.
Don't you have enough difficult personalities to deal with?
"What's one more?" Kevin replied enthusiastically.
You're a glutton for punishment, Felicity said. I'm texting the last address we have on file for him. Maybe bring some earplugs. He's a yeller.
With Jericho in tow, Kevin followed Felicity's direction to an impressive Tudor mansion in the affluent Hancock Park neighborhood and rang the doorbell. A gracefully beautiful woman in her 60s answered. "Can I help you?" "Hi there," Kevin greeted. "I'm Kevin Williams, and this is Jericho. I'm a film producer and was hoping to speak with Eli about a role he would be perfect for. Is he in?" The woman looked taken aback and maybe a little nervous. "It's certainly been a while since someone has been looking to cast him," she said hesitantly. But she politely added, "Please, come in." As the woman led Kevin and Jericho through the impressive yet tasteful home, it occurred to Kevin that this woman clearly didn't fit the mold of Eli Townsend's well-documented dating history of girlfriends. He had never been photographed with a woman who couldn't have been mistaken for a cheerleader. After leading them to a cozy sitting room, she said, "I'll let Eli know you're here." Kevin couldn't help but notice the slightest shake in her voice as she said the name. Looking around the room where film memorabilia and framed posters lined the walls, it was apparent that Eli was only showcasing the films he shot after the meltdown on The Last Trader. The only exception Kevin noted with interest was the Oscar displayed front and center on the mantel. After a moment, the man entered the room. To the casual observer, he could be either Eli or Byron. A few years older than he was in the last movie Kevin had watched, but clearly still fit.
"Marybeth told me a couple of producers have come to visit," he said while shaking their hand. "I didn't quite believe her."
"Well, we understand you've taken a break from the industry," Kevin said tactfully. "But we're casting for an epic blockbuster, and we think Eli Townsend is the final missing ingredient."
"Well, that sounds great to me,"
the older man said while leaning forward in his seat. "There's just one problem," Kevin continued. "No one knows where he is. Do you think you can help us with that? Byron." Byron was frozen in his seat, unprepared for being called out.
How did you know?"
he stammered. "Byron supposedly went missing after Eli's breakdown on The Last Trader," Kevin responded calmly. "In all of Eli's movies that followed, the performances were unrecognizable, but the stunt work was as consistently nuanced as it had always been." Byron sat back in his chair, taking in Kevin's assessment. Finally, he spoke.
"In this town, your name and face are everything," he said. "A hack movie star who's a proven box office draw is worth 10 Tony Award winners that audiences couldn't pick out of a lineup. The mystique around Eli's meltdown and the Oscar he won for it kept him in demand. Eli didn't want to be Eli anymore, but I did. Everyone wins."
"Except for Eli's reputation as an actor," Kevin countered. "I can't help but think you got the better end of this deal." Byron looked embarrassed.
"Okay, so maybe I couldn't live up to his talent as an actor, but I improved his reputation as a person. Shouldn't that count for something?"
"And the Oscar?" Kevin asked, motioning to the statue on the mantel. "I'm guessing Eli didn't give that to you as a gift." Kevin could tell Byron was uncomfortable at having to confront everything he had kept buried for the past decade.
"He had already disappeared before the ceremony," Byron admitted. "Rumors were already swirling about where he had run off to. You probably think I'm just an opportunist, but Eli was my friend. I wanted his last public appearance to be a positive one."
"Until you decided to take over his identity on a more permanent basis," Kevin replied.
"Look, I get it,"
Byron said, getting irritated.
"You don't have to respect the choices I've made, but what's done is done. I can't change it."
"But you can help Eli reclaim his legacy," Kevin countered. "We didn't come here just to berate you. We really do want to cast Eli as Julius Caesar in our Cleopatra film for Eminent Studios. Will you honor your friendship with him by helping us find him?" Byron considered this for a moment.
"I'll tell you what I know," he said, "but I want something in return."
"What would that be?" Kevin asked.
"This Cleopatra movie. I want to supervise the stunts," Byron said, "even if you don't get Eli in the cast."
Kevin looked at Jericho, who leaned in. Under his breath, Jericho said,
"He is the best in the business, and he's out of the Stuntmen's Guild. He'll be able to keep them off our backs."
With a bit of reluctance, Kevin turned back to Byron. "You've got a deal," he said. "Now, what can you tell us?"
"All I know," Byron replied, "is that Eli always used to say, 'When I leave this town, I'm going back to my roots.'"
"That's it?" Kevin asked. "You don't have any more specifics about where he is?"
"Afraid not," Byron said. "I would have returned the Oscar to him if I did."
Cryptic, Kevin thought. Once again, Byron seems to be getting the better end of the bargain in this quid pro quo. "Well," he said to Byron, "thank you for telling us what you know. We'll send over a contract for stunt supervisor." As they were rising, Byron said,
"Wait."
He retrieved the Oscar from the mantel and handed it to Kevin.
"If you do find him, it's long overdue that this is returned to him."
Kevin nodded his appreciation at this gesture of good faith. Maybe Byron really did care about Eli. Mary Beth entered the room.
Eli,
she said tentatively.
would you and our guest like some tea?
No need, Mary Beth, Kevin responded politely. We were just telling Byron that we'll be in touch soon. Mary Beth was speechless. It had been years since anyone else had called her husband Byron. Kevin smiled at her as he and Jericho walked out the front door. As they walked down the pathway to the car, Jericho said,
His roots? Does that mean his hometown?
Somehow I doubt he went back to Clearwater, Missouri, Kevin replied.
What else would he mean by his roots? Jericho asked.
You don't only have roots where you're born, Kevin replied, lost in thought. You put down roots anywhere and with anyone who helped you become who you were meant to be. Anywhere that helped you grow into your strongest self.
So where else would that be? Jericho countered. A school? A first job?
A first job. That's it, Kevin exclaimed. As he beckoned Jericho into the car, he explained, Eli's breakout role was playing a young Abraham Lincoln. Kevin started driving and called Sandra over speakerphone. Sandra, Kevin asked, can you look up the shooting locations for the movie Honest Roots? Kevin heard typing on the other end, and then Sandra replied, Most of the movie was shot on a ranch outside of Ojai, but the land was sold and hasn't been used for a movie production for years. How long ago did it sell? Kevin asked. Sandra replied, 12 years ago. Exactly when Eli went missing, Kevin smiled. That's very helpful, Sandra. Can you send me the address? After hanging up, Kevin began making his way to Ojai. As Kevin and Jericho drove north on the 101 freeway, the skyscrapers of Los Angeles gave way to suburbs, which eventually thinned out even further into spacious farmland. When they turned inland off the freeway, the winding roads through flora-covered mountains signaled the distance from the imposing metropolis of L.A. They were 2 hours and a world away. They eventually emerged onto Ojai's quaint Main Street. Spanish architecture housing wine tasting rooms and ice cream parlors lined the thoroughfare. It was wholesome and picturesque, and Kevin knew that this was not where they'd find Eli. They continued past the main street where the small town once again gave way to open space. Vineyards stretched toward the mountains on either side of the road until they too disappeared into untouched land. After another mile or so, Kevin turned onto a dirt road heading into the woods. They followed the winding path until they finally reached the address Sandra had sent. Upon first glance, all they could see was a rotting wooden fence and a fallen sign that read, Grapevine Ranch. Well, this is the place, Kevin announced. It definitely looked abandoned, but they didn't come all this way to not at least look around. Kevin and Jericho climbed through the fence and began exploring the grounds. The few structures they came across were in various states of disrepair, some resembling little more than piles of wood. But then, through the trees, Kevin could see a faint light. There, he pointed out to Jericho. They started walking toward the light, and sure enough, a log cabin revealed itself. It didn't look like it had been renovated any time recently, but on the rest of the former buildings on the ranch, it was clearly maintained and in use. A puff of smoke curled from the chimney. As they approached the front door, they heard a strange sound nearby.
What was that? Jericho asked.
They turned the corner of the house to find a chicken coop, with some very angry chickens that clearly weren't used to trespassers. The chickens swarmed Kevin and Jericho, squawking and pecking at the strangers. I just need to focus enough to calm them down, Kevin thought. But just as Kevin was about to use his superior animal husbandry skills to communicate with the chickens, he heard the cocking of a shotgun behind him. Kevin and Jericho swung around to see an old man holding a rifle. His skin was weathered, and he wore a matted beard, but it was unmistakably Academy Award winner Eli Townsend. Eli pointed the barrel at Kevin's head.
Get off my land.
Kevin discovered that difficult aging actor Eli Townsend was living in Ojai, and when looking for him with Jericho Townsend, they found a decrepit cabin with chickens outside, which was used as the shooting location of Eli's first film. They also found Eli holding a shotgun to Kevin's head. Kevin threw his hands up in the face of Eli's rifle. "Don't shoot," he yelled.
"Why shouldn't I?" Eli shouted back. "If you wanted me to follow your rules, you should have thought of that before you trespassed on my property."
"We would have gladly called ahead if we had a phone number for you," Kevin said lightly, trying to cut the tension. "We just want to talk to you. Could you lower the rifle?" But Eli held the rifle with resolve.
"Talk to me? What would a couple of city boys like you want with an old man in the woods?"
"Not just any man in the woods," Kevin replied. "Eli Townsend."
"Never heard him,"
Eli replied with a hell of a poker face. "Nice try," Kevin answered. "You would have had to be isolated in this cabin for 40 years to never have heard of Eli Townsend. But that'd be impossible since 40 years ago Eli Townsend was filming Honest Roots on this very ranch." He was busted but still had no interest in a friendly chat.
"You come all this way for an autograph?"
"I came to offer you a career revival," Kevin said. "I'm producing a movie about Cleopatra with Eminence Studios. You're the only choice to play Julius Caesar." This was a bit of a stretch since Eminence president Helen O'Day had only agreed to consider Eli under the condition that he auditions. But Kevin would worry about that later. He had learned that lying was the best way to get what you wanted in Hollywood.
"What makes you think I want a career revival?" Eli yelled. "Those vultures in Hollywood don't deserve my genius. I gave them everything. My heart, my soul, my sanity."
He trailed off before locking eyes with Kevin with a fiery stare.
"I do not cower before these waves," he declared emphatically.
Jericho glanced sideways at Kevin. What the hell is he talking about?
"For I am not at the mercy of tides," Eli continued. "I am the master of my destiny, for
a ship does not carry a man across an ocean unless that man is at the helm." Kevin finished for him. "Yeah, I watched Transatlantic. I've seen all your movies." Eli wavered in his stance in spite of himself. "See, even now you can't stop acting. You're a born performer," Kevin said encouragingly. Reaching into his satchel, he added, "Some people did and still do appreciate your genius. Actually, many do." From his satchel, he produced the Oscar Eli had won for The Last Trader and handed it to him. Eli set down his shotgun as he took the statue. He speechlessly held it, running his thumb over the engraving with his name. "Did you even know you won?" Kevin asked.
"I didn't think anyone would bother voting for me,"
Eli admitted. Looking up at Kevin and Jericho, Eli's eyes softened.
"Why don't you come inside before the chickens start pecking at you again?"
Kevin glanced down at the nearest chicken, who was glaring at Kevin like it was just waiting for its attack orders. Inside the cabin, it became clear just how minimally Eli had been living over the past 12 years. The indication that they weren't in the 19th century was a single power strip connected to a hot plate and a clapper light, and a pile of printed scripts next to a rocking chair. There must have been at least 20. Kevin glanced through the top view. "Are these all your movies?" he asked. Eli looked a little embarrassed.
"No DVD player up here. I wanted some way to relive my glory days."
Looking around the sparse room, Kevin was saddened. Had Eli really spent 12 years in isolation, doing nothing but tending to chickens and rereading his old screenplays?
"I know what you're thinking," Eli said to Kevin. "But don't worry, I also sell jam. The ranch's old caretaker picks up the jars every week and brings them to the farmer's market. My best flavor is peach."
But Eli's one additional hobby wasn't enough to dispel Kevin's sense that the entire cabin was cloaked in loneliness. Eli placed his Oscar on a ledge next to the rocking chair and admired it thoughtfully.
"They went after me in the press after The Last Trader," he mused. "I guess they had their reasons, but art isn't tidy. I was playing a sociopath. I was never going to authentically capture the essence by coloring inside the lines, by switching on and off between action and cut.
Kevin had come here prepared for Eli's crotchety demeanor and commanding presence, but his underlying sensitivity caught him off guard. It occurred to Kevin that Eli was simply an artist who felt exiled by his colleagues and audience.
My job as an actor is to find the humanity in the characters I play, Eli continued. Whoever the character is, I take that responsibility seriously. You want me to play a dictator. Embodying and empathizing with that dictator becomes my top priority. You should know that going in.
Does that mean you'll consider it? Kevin asked hopefully.
I have my conditions, Eli replied.
I pay very well, Kevin assured him. For the first time, Eli let out a small laugh.
Look around you. Do you really think I'm a man who highly values material possessions? I can grow my own peaches.
Good point, Kevin admitted, taking in his surroundings. But you value this cabin. Let me relocate it for you. I'll have it reassembled in Bel Air so you can easily come to the set while still feeling at home.
Eli considered Kevin's offer. You really want me in this movie, don't you?
I wouldn't be going through all this trouble if I didn't, Kevin replied.
Well, I need one more thing then, Eli said.
Kevin wasn't concerned. Name it.
Dame Mabel St. John, Eli replied. The love of my life and my co-star in Dancing on Air. I won't act in unless I'm beside her.
Kevin cringed. Dame Mabel St. James was a two-time Oscar winner who had mostly retired from acting. She resided on her estate in Surrey with two Cocker Spaniels and only occasionally accepted supporting roles on BBC dramas or awards-bait historical films when she got the itch. Cleopatra wouldn't necessarily be out of the question for her to consider, except there are no roles for a woman her age in the script, Kevin explained. Cleopatra died at age 39 and no one even knows for sure who her mother was.
For God's sakes, it's Hollywood,
Eli responded in exasperation.
Make something up. Do you think Mel Gibson cared about historical accuracy when he decided William Wallace was a humble farmer? Cleopatra was a woman. Surely she had a therapist or something.
Kevin considered this. It hadn't occurred to him that they could just mold the facts of history to serve their movie's purpose. He didn't feel great about it, but if there was one thing he had learned since arriving in Hollywood, it was that you couldn't get anywhere without compromise. Let me see what I can do, Kevin said to Eli. He took out his cell and began to step away.
It's getting dark, Jericho pointed out. I'll get the car and bring it around.
Jericho headed back toward the edge of the grounds, and Kevin saw that, unsurprisingly, he had no service in the cabin. He held his phone up to Eli. No service here. I'm just going to walk around outside for a bit until I find a spot where I can place the call. Kevin walked out of the house and wandering through the trees. After weeks of the hustle and bustle of LA, the quiet and stillness of this ranch was jarring. Even the most devoted introverts would go insane with this much isolation, Kevin thought, but he could also see why Eli had fled there. Finally, a single bar appeared on Kevin's phone. He quickly dialed. Hey, Sabrina, he said to Cleopatra's screenwriter once she answered. I know we said we were using your last rewrite as the production draft, but I need you to make another addition, a new character, a woman in her 60s. He paused while Sabrina spoke, then replied, I know there wasn't anyone like that in Cleopatra's orbit. You can just make one up. After another pause, he said, I know you pride yourself on historical accuracy. If critics take issue with it, I'll take the blame. After a final pause, he said, Thank you, Sabrina. He hung up and dialed another call. Hi, Felicity. I have a favor to ask. Can you reach out to Mabel St. James's representatives and gauge interest in her joining Cleopatra? He paused while Felicity responded, then said, Yes. I know there are no women her age in the script. Sabrina is adding one. After Felicity spoke again, he sighed. Yes, I told Sabrina I'd take the blame for it. Thank you, Felicity. Kevin hung up and rubbed his temples. Eli was already causing a headache, and he hadn't even officially signed on yet. Kevin walked back to Eli's cabin. As he entered, he said, "Okay, everything is in motion to get—" Kevin was interrupted by Eli charging at him, swinging a sword. The only major character left to cast in Cleopatra was Julius Caesar, and Kevin wanted legendary actor Eli Townsend for the role. Kevin and Jericho tracked Eli to a small cabin on the ranch where he shot his first film. Kevin convinced Eli to consider taking the role, but Eli's one condition was that his former co-star and lover, Mabel St. James, be cast alongside him. Kevin called screenwriter Sabrina Montgomery and asked her to add an age-appropriate role for Mabel. When Kevin returned to Eli's cabin after making the call, Eli charged at him with a sword. Kevin dodged the first swing of Eli's sword. "Eli, what the hell?" Kevin yelled. Eli had a maniacal look in his eye, and in addition to wielding a sword, was fully decked out in a toga, head wreath, and sandals. "Where did you even get a sword?" Kevin yelled, flabbergasted, while Eli continued to swing the weapon. "For Rome!" Eli yelled, punching the sword into the air. Behind Eli, Kevin saw the evidence that Eli did have one more hobby that had been keeping him busy all these years. In a wardrobe Kevin hadn't noticed, Eli had an array of props and costumes, ranging from a suit of armor to a scuba suit. "He's flowing through me, Kevin," Eli said while swinging the sword. "I already feel him. The great Roman Emperor and I are one." "That's great and all," Kevin said while continuing to duck Eli's swings. "But I can't convince Eminence to hire you if you murder me, and I definitely won't be able to reunite you with Mabel." Eli stopped swinging. "What do you mean, convince the studio? I thought I was the only choice for Caesar." "You're my only choice," Kevin said honestly. "But given the track record of your recent performances, Eminence wants to see an audition before they agree to sign you." "What recent performances?" Eli yelled in confusion. "My last performance was 12 years ago and I won an Oscar for it." "Oh yeah," Kevin thought. "Eli doesn't know about his stuntman Byron impersonating him." "Well," Kevin said, thinking on his feet for a way to break the news gently, "as far as everyone knows, your last performance was 5 years ago. Your old friend Byron Mathers has been performing under your name." Whereas Eli's erratic behavior might have been considered justified in the face of this news, he simply collapsed into his rocking chair. "Byron was one of the true friends I had," Eli said. "He starred every single character assassination and never got any of the credit for all the roles we performed together. If he finally got the spotlight he always wanted, I'm happy for him." Kevin was touched by the softer side of Eli, who really did have affection for his old stuntman. "For whatever it's worth," Kevin said, "he's the one who helped me find you, and he wanted you to have this Oscar. He really does care about you." "So the studio wants to know that I still have the goods," Eli said. "And Mabel?" "That's in motion," Kevin assured him. Jericho returned to the cabin after retrieving the car. "Whoa, cool toga," he said to Eli. Kevin's phone buzzed and he saw a text from Felicity. "Your phone keeps going to voicemail. Call me ASAP." "We should get going," Kevin said to Eli. "I'll have my assistant arrange for an iPhone to be delivered to you and we'll set up a meeting with the studio." As Kevin and Jericho walked to the car, Eli pointed his sword and said, "You're an honorable man, Kevin Williams. We shall meet again." "We'll talk soon, Eli," Kevin replied. As they drove away, Kevin was relieved to get out of there without any gunshot wounds, sword stabbings, or fatal chicken bites. Once they drove out of the woods and had better cell service, Kevin called Felicity back.
"Kevin!"
Felicity shouted into the phone.
"Where have you been?"
"I'm in Ojai, which has bad cell phone service. What's going on?" Kevin asked.
"It's Madame Spatzel,"
Felicity replied.
"She's freaking out. She said she's quitting the movie."
Kevin started rubbing his forehead. He had just secured one major actor only to have his other star threaten to leave. "I'll be there as fast as I can," Kevin told Felicity. After hanging up, Kevin turned to Jericho and said, "It's time to put some of your stunt driving skills to use. We have to get back to Beverly Hills. Fast." Jericho smiled. He was all too happy to oblige. Thanks to Jericho's expert maneuvering, they made it back to Beverly Hills Hotel in half the time. Kevin rushed up to the penthouse to find Madame Spatzel maniacally cleaning. Walked over to Felicity, who was looking very stressed. Kevin leaned in and said quietly, "When you said freaking out, I expected screaming and crying." "No, she saved that for the stage," Felicity replied. "But you need to calm her down soon. Helen O'Day is on her way." Kevin didn't want to give Helen any more excuses for keeping a close eye on them. He cautiously stepped over to where Madame Spatzel was frantically scrubbing a lamp while singing 99 Red Balloons to herself. "You know they have a cleaning staff here that will take care of that," Kevin said. Madame Spatzel didn't even get him while replying. "So you think they can do a better job than me, too?" She stomped over to the window and started taking a lint roller to the curtains. "What are you talking about?" Kevin asked. "I looked up this Eli Townsend that you want," Madame Spatzel answered angrily. "I thought he was some washed-up has-been. Now I learn he's an Oscar winner? I'm supposed to be the biggest star, Kevin. Why must you take this film away from me?" She grabbed a vacuum from the closet, and Kevin watched in confusion as she brought it to the bed and started vacuuming the duvet. "I would never take the movie away from you," Kevin tried to yell over the din of the vacuum cleaner. But Madame Spatzel, who clearly didn't want to hear what he had to say, had resumed screaming, singing 99 red balloons floating in the summer sky. Kevin walked over to Madame Spatzel and gently turned off the vacuum. "Let's sit down and talk," he suggested. "No," Madame Spatzel replied defiantly. "There's a sympathy meeting tonight. I'll go there where they understand me." The last thing Kevin wanted was for Madame Spatzel to run into the manipulative arms of sympathy while in this state, but he got a brief reprieve when Eminence Studios president Helen O'Day walked into the suite. "I left my dinner with Sharon Oprah for this, so this better either be really important or at least more interesting than Oprah giving painfully detailed descriptions of every dress she fit into again now that she's lost weight." "He's casting an Oscar winner in my movie," Madame Spatzel wailed. Helen stared at her. "Are those happy tears? Did you call me here to tell me some good news that I already know?" "It's not good news," Madame Spatzel yelled. "It's terrible. I'm supposed to be the biggest star." "But Madame Spatzel, you are," Kevin assured her. "The movie is called Cleopatra, and you're playing Cleopatra. It will be your face on the poster, your name at the top of the credits." "But this Oscar winner, he'll take attention away from me," she pouted. "Don't look at it that way," Kevin challenged her. "If anything, he'll bring more attention to you. This is now an Academy Award-winning cast, and you're the lead. That speaks very highly of your star power." "Really?" Madame Spatzel sniffed. Kevin gave Helen a look to encourage her to chime in. This was working, but Madame Spatzel was clearly still vying for more validation. Helen sighed, not wanting to deal with this childishness, but she gave in, laying on her sweetest voice a little too thick so that she sounded more like a babysitter than a studio executive. She knelt down next to Madame Spatzel and said, "Kevin is right. The Devil Wears Prada was going straight to DVD until Meryl Streep signed on. The movie became a huge hit, Anne Hathaway and Emily Blunt became award-winning actors, and over 15 years later, I still can't wear Prada or people will use the title against me." Madame Spatzel wiped her tears and allowed herself a small smile. "So you're saying I can use this man for my own personal gain?" "Yes, sweetie," Helen replied. With Madame Spatzel calming down, Kevin saw an opportunity to get information from Helen while she was out of her comfort zone. "Helen makes a great point," Kevin said, "and Cleopatra was never going to be some direct-to-DVD release. It's going to redefine Hollywood." Sneaking a glance at Helen, he added, "Not since the Lumiere brothers will a film have such a profound impact on the art form." Helen kept a poker face, but Madame Spatzel was clearly annoyed to not have the conversation center on her anymore. "Ah, the Lumiere brothers. All the time you're talking about the Lumiere brothers. Why are you so obsessed with them? They're dead, their films are boring, and they're French." Helen coyly looked at Kevin, seeming to know that he was trying to get her to reveal something useful to him. "I believe I've also heard you mention the Lumiere brothers before, Kevin," she said. "I wish I could satisfy your curiosity. The studio had purchased a collection of their films decades ago, but they've all been donated to museums by now." She narrowed her eyes a bit and added, "or have otherwise gone missing." Kevin wondered if that was a thinly veiled reference to the Decoy Lumiere brothers film he had found in her office. "That's too bad," Kevin replied, not giving anything away. "If you want to track down the rest of their collection, you could always ask Jack Warner," Helen said with a sly smile. Everyone in the room except for Madame Spatzel knew that Jack Warner had been dead since the 1970s. "Who?" Madame Spatzel interjected. Helen checked her phone as it buzzed. "I have to go. Just got an SOS text from Cher that Oprah is now recounting a detailed history of Weight Watchers." Without another word, she swiftly left the suite. "Feeling better?" Kevin asked Madame Spatzel. "Yes," she said, still drying her tears. "But I still want to go to the sympathy meeting." Kevin knew he couldn't risk setting her off by advising against that, so instead he said, "That's a great idea. Why don't I join you? I've been wanting to see what these meetings are about." "Oh yes, Kevin, you should," Madame Spatzel squealed with excitement, as if she hadn't been crying just 30 seconds ago. A few minutes later, Kevin and Madame Spatzel were in their car on the way to Hancock Park. Emo Squire tagged along since he was interested in hearing about Sympathy's supposed ecological initiatives, though despite Lance's boasting, Kevin still hadn't seen what, if anything, Sympathy did to benefit the environment. Emo may also want to meet some young actresses. When they reached the house, one of the flower girls that Kevin had seen during the audition for Arsinoe greeted them at the door. "Welcome," the girl said dreamily, seeming to not recognize Kevin despite beginning to disrobe in front of him a few days ago. The girl led them to the living room, revealing an eerie setup. Flower Girl sat in a circle on the floor, silently swaying while Lance sat in the center, holding a glass of wine and appearing to be meditating. Madame Spatzel happily joined the circle while Kevin hung back, hesitant. As he debated what to do next, he was surprised to see Audrey, whom he had just cast to play Arsinoe, walk into the room. She looked just as surprised to see him. "Kevin, what are you doing here?" she asked. "I decided to join Madame Spatzel tonight," Kevin explained. "Are you part of this group?" "Well, admittedly, I'm not terribly involved," she said. "But my husband Lance leads the group. Have you met?" This was a bomb drop for Kevin. He glanced at Lance, whose eyes were closed, seemingly still meditating, though his mouth was in a tight grimace. "Yes, we've met," Kevin replied. It didn't add how Audrey could be married to Lance. She was so alert and self-possessed compared to the other women. Wasn't she disturbed by what was happening around her? Kevin dropped his voice and said to Audrey, "I'm hoping you could maybe tell me about a woman who I heard was in your improv troupe and was also involved with Sympathy at one point. Do you know Hazel?" In the center of the circle, on hearing the name Hazel, Lance's wine glass shattered in his hand. While he was in the middle of negotiating terms with Eli Townsend, the method actor he wanted to play Julius Caesar, Kevin received a call from Felicity Dufour, who said that Madame Spatzel was having a meltdown. Returning to Hollywood right away, Kevin and Emo went with Madame Spatzel to attend a sympathy meeting, which they had hoped would calm her down. While they were there, Kevin asked around about Hazel, the missing girl Lily had met at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and when Lance heard her name, he tensed up and shattered a wine glass in his hands. As the shattered glass rained down on the floor, Lance's wife Audrey rushed to his side. "Lance, darling, are you all right? What's going on over here?" By the time Audrey arrived to help, Lance was already starting to wobble.
"Oh, I'm all right, dear. I just need to..."
Then, before he could finish his sentence, Lance toppled to the floor as blood oozed from his cut hand. In a flash, Audrey dropped to her knees and cradled his head. "Oh, God," she cried out. "Lance is a hemophiliac. He'll die if he loses too much blood." Then, turning her concern into outrage, she looked up at Kevin and shouted, What's the meaning of this? Why is his wine glass broken? Sorry for the mess he caused accidentally, Kevin got down on his knees to help. I'm sorry, Audrey, it must have been something I said. Don't worry, though, I can help. Reaching into a satchel, Kevin pulled out a recovery pill and gave it to Audrey. Here, he said. If you can get him to take this, it should slow the bleeding. Following Kevin's instructions, Audrey forced the pill into Lance's mouth and held a glass of water up to his lips. At the same time, Kevin pulled some bandages out of his satchel and started to treat Lance's wounds. When he finally got a chance to pause and look around, Kevin saw dozens of sympathy members crowded around them with worried looks on their faces. At that moment, something about them reminded Kevin of a bunch of lost children who depended on Lance for their very survival. Their reactions were almost hysterical. "Please, get up, Lance," one of them said. "I'm nothing without you," another cried out. Holding tears back, yet another mumbled, "Please, Lance, we need you. We all need you so much." Wow, Kevin thought to himself. These people really worship Lance like he's some kind of god. I'm glad that Madame Spatzel has a support group, and I hope she doesn't lose her individuality like some of these other people have. Just then, as the recovery pill finally began to take effect, Lance slowly opened his eyes and looked around the room.
"What's going on?"
he asked.
"Have I died and gone to heaven?"
Relieved to see him awake, Audrey smiled as she ran her fingers through his hair. "Not yet, my love. You're still in Hollywood, where you belong." Some of the sympathy leaders started to cry tears of joy when they saw Lance reawaken. One of them got down and threw her arms around him. "Never leave us again, Lance. Without you, we are but a flock of sheep with no one to shepherd us home." Lance wiped a tear off the member's cheek, looked her directly in the eyes, and said,
"Even if my body betrays me, I will never truly leave you, my little angels. Just as the stars hang over the earth, so too will I watch over you for eternity."
Comforted by his words, the sympathy members all embraced him at once in an enormous group hug. "We love you, Lance."
"I love you too,"
he replied with a warm smile. Sensing an opportunity to pose his question a second time, Kevin took a step forward and said, "Excuse me, Lance, if I may, before you passed out, I was about to ask you a question. I was wondering if you knew anything about..." With a sour look on her face, Audrey cut Kevin off before he could finish his question. "This little question of yours was enough to make Lance pass out, and you want to ask it again? I don't think so, Kevin. You just let me handle the questions instead, all right?" As more and more sympathy members flocked around Lance, Audrey pulled Kevin aside and asked, "Now what's this question of yours?" Kevin cleared his throat before speaking, pausing to choose his next words very carefully. "I was wondering if you knew anything about what happened to a member named Hazel. My wife, Lily, met her when Hazel was working as a maid at the Beverly Hills Hotel, but we haven't seen her around since. She said she was a member of Sympathy. Have you heard anything about it?" Audrey shook her head. "People come and go all the time, Kevin. She probably just didn't have what it takes." Just then, Kevin heard a familiar voice come from behind. "I don't mean to eavesdrop, but is it possible she just found a new job?" When Kevin turned around, he saw Ryder standing there. "It's not uncommon for housekeepers to split up their time between here and Palm Springs," he said. "Maybe she just went out of the city for a while." Kevin wasn't sure about Ryder's explanation, but Audrey accepted it without hesitation. "That could also explain it, yes. Either way, I wouldn't worry about it, Kevin. She's sure to come back eventually." Kevin wanted to ask more questions about Hazel, but before he could, Lance started tapping his wine glass with a knife to get everyone's attention.
"Everyone, this little accident of mine has got me thinking, and now I'd like to make a speech about it," Lance began. Immediately, the sympathy members fell silent and plopped down around him. Then, with a twinkle in his eye, Lance said, "So much in this life happens outside our control, doesn't it? For example, I could never have predicted that I'd cut my hand today and pass out from the blood loss, and yet it did. I bet these little moments of unpredictability happen to all of us, don't they?"
As the sympathy members nodded their heads, Lance pointed at one of them, a blonde girl in the front row, and said,
"When was the last time something happened to you that was outside of your control, little angel?"
The blonde girl thought about it for a moment and then replied, "I got pulled over for speeding on the freeway last week." Lance nodded with a smile.
"Yes, that is exactly the kind of thing I mean. Has anyone else had a moment like that recently? Perhaps a happy surprise instead of a bad one?"
Another member raised their hand and said, "When I went to Burger Hut yesterday, they gave me a large French fry instead of a small." Lance clapped his hands in excitement.
"Well, although fattening food are strictly against the rules of sympathy, the example counts nonetheless. Some of you may be wondering why I'm going on about this, but here's my point. The truth is, these little moments where we lose control might seem like rare occurrences, but in reality they make up the vast majority of our lives. I mean, what are we really in control over anyway? Do trees decide where to grow? Does the sun decide where to cast its light and where not to? The answer, of course, is no. So why is it that we humans feel so in control of our lives? I say to you here today, my little angels, that the only way to stay sane in this world is to give up control completely and leave it all to a higher power."
"Leave it all to a higher power," the sympathy member echoed back in unison. While listening to Lance's speech, Kevin couldn't help but think about his own free will. I guess that free will really is hard to find when you go back and look for it, Kevin thought to himself. In a mechanistic universe governed by physics, who's to say we aren't all just robots playing our predetermined routine? The Night King tells me all the time about how important it is that I fulfill my destiny. But can destiny and free will really exist at the same time? After pondering his own free will for a moment or two, Kevin looked across the room and saw a face that startled him. "Is that Sergio?" he muttered under his breath. Indeed, it was. Sergio, the leader of the Stuntmen's Guild, was standing across the room sipping from a glass of wine. Sergio hadn't noticed Kevin yet, so rather than confront him, Kevin decided to lay low and keep his eyes on him for a while. Then, a few moments later, Sergio moved across the room and started chatting with someone else who Kevin recognized. Is that Helen O'Day, the president of Eminence Studios? What are they doing here? Now, Kevin had to learn more, but as he started to walk over to them, he suddenly heard one of the sympathy members scream, "Lance, no, not again!" Just then, Kevin heard a loud thud, and when he looked over his shoulder, he saw Lance fall to the floor again. "It looks like Lance's condition is a little more serious than I thought," he said to himself. Kevin and Emo accompanied an antsy Madame Spatzel to a sympathy meeting where Lance tensed up and fainted after being asked about Hazel. Kevin quickly treated him with a recovery pill and began to ask more about Hazel, but Audrey, Lance's wife, insisted that he ask her instead. When asked about Hazel, Audrey and Ryder both assured him not to worry, saying she probably just left town for a few days. A few moments later, Kevin spotted Sergio, the leader of the Stuntmen's Guild, and Helen O'Day, the president of Eminence Studios. But before he could talk to them, Lance fainted a second time. "Get out of the way!" Audrey shouted as she pushed through the crowd and knelt down next to Lance. She inspected his arms and legs for another cut but didn't see any blood anywhere. "What happened?" she asked. "Did he get cut again?" One of the sympathy members with tears in her eyes shook her head and exclaimed, "I don't know what the problem is. He just collapsed right in front of me." Joining the others as they surrounded Lance and Audrey, Madame Spatzel looked over at Kevin and said, "Can you give him another pill, Kevin? Something is wrong with Lance." Kevin walked up and stood over Lance with a concerned look on his face. "It was just a few minutes ago that I gave him the recovery pill, so the medicine should still be in his system. I don't know what kind of pills to give him until I know what the problem is. Do you think this has something to do with his hemophilia?" he asked Audrey. Audrey double-checked Lance's hand to make sure he still wasn't bleeding. His hand isn't bleeding anymore, so it can't be hemophilia. I have no idea what's happening to him." Frightened by Audrey's words, some of the sympathy members began to cover their eyes in sobs. "We're not ready for you to leave us, Lance. Please don't leave your body behind yet." Ignoring the flower girl's cries, Kevin turned to Audrey and asked, "Is this the first time something like this has ever happened?" Audrey nodded, her lips trembling with concern. "Yes, he's never just fainted out of the blue like this. We have to get him to see a doctor. Will you help me lift him, Kevin?" Instead, Kevin pulled out his phone. "No need," he said. "I recently had a hologram projector installed to my phone so I can bring the doctor to us. Just give me a moment. I know one of the best doctors in the world." As Kevin adjusted the settings of his cell phone, Ryder looked over with astonishment in his eyes. "No way! They finally invented hologram technology? Is it going to come with the next iPhone?" Kevin shook his head and laughed. "Actually, it's one of the first prototypes ever made, and it cost me almost $1 billion to pair it with my phone. You're looking at another 20 years before it hits the general market at least." Just then, Dr. Serafina Willow answered the call, and as Kevin held up his phone, a holographic image of her was projected in front of him. She was sort of blue and transparent like a ghost, but other than that, it was like she was really there. "Hello, Kevin. Is there a medical emergency this time, or are you just playing around with the hologram again?" Kevin gestured at Lance, who was still lying on the floor, and said, "I've got someone for you to take a look at, Doc. This man, Lance, just fainted out of the blue. He is a hemophiliac, but we don't think that's got anything to do with it." Free to move on her own, Dr. Willow walked over to Lance and knelt down beside him. Thanks to a pair of high-tech gloves she was wearing back in Chicago, her digital touch enabled her to take his pulse. "Well, his pulse is normal, but he appears to have gone completely unresponsive." When the words left her lips, the sympathy members gasped and started to panic. "Unresponsive?" they cried out. "Without Lance, the stars have no meaning." Such an extreme comment struck Dr. Willow as odd. With a calm voice, she said, "Well, let's not jump to any conclusions. Like I said, his heart rate is just fine, so I assume the problem is neurological. To learn more, we'll have to get him inside an MRI machine." "All right, then I'll call him an ambulance," Audrey said. As she pulled out her cell phone, though, Kevin waved his hand and said, "Hold on a minute, Audrey." Then he turned to Dr. Willow with a quicker solution in mind. "Do you think the MRI machine in your office could scan a holographic version of Lance's brain?" he asked. Dr. Willow scratched her head. I don't think it's ever been tried before, but theoretically I don't see why not. Let's give it a try at least." When Kevin tapped a button on his phone, Dr. Willow's hologram disappeared. The holographic projection works both ways, Kevin explained to everyone else as he held his phone over Lance. Once it captures a scan of Lance, it can project his image back to Dr. Willow in Chicago. Once the scan was complete, Dr. Willow aimed her cell phone into the MRI machine and projected Lance's hologram inside. After turning it on, Dr. Willow's voice came through Kevin's cell phone and said, "It's working. This technology could revolutionize how we practice medicine in the future." For the next few minutes, Kevin and the sympathy members waited in suspense, but then the results finally came in. "Well, it doesn't look good," Dr. Willow said with a deep breath. "Anyone who doesn't want to be around to hear this should probably leave now." Some of the sympathy members left in a pool of tears, but most decided to stay. "I will stay at Lance's side to the very end," one of them said. Then Dr. Willow continued, "Well, the good news is I found out what was wrong, and the bad news is I found out what was wrong. According to the scans, his brain, specifically his frontal lobe, is extremely damaged. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but there are whole chunks of his brain that are covered in holes, as if something has been eating away at it." For a few seconds, everyone was too shocked to utter a word, but then the waterworks started. "It can't be true! Don't leave us, Lance! I'll take the holes, Lance. Put the holes in my brain instead. Please, God, it should have been me!" The sympathy followers cried out. Although Audrey was deeply concerned herself, she couldn't stand the sound of everyone else crying and wailing. All right, get some space, people. Take 5. Then she turned to Jericho and said, Jericho, escort everyone out for a moment, would you please? Jericho nodded and started corralling the sympathy members into the backyard. All right, folks, Lance and Audrey need a little alone time, all right? Let's give them some space for a few minutes. As the group moved outside, Kevin kept his eyes on Helen O'Day, who went out along with them. In the end, the only ones who stayed inside were Kevin, Audrey, Emo, Ryder, and Madame Spatzel. With tears welling up in her eyes, Audrey stroked Lance's cheek and looked up at Dr. Willow's projection. What do you suggest we do, Doctor? Dr. Willow put her hands in her pocket and lowered her head. Unfortunately, she was no stranger to these types of conversations. Well, I'm sorry, ma'am, but unfortunately there isn't a whole lot we can do in a situation like this. The best course of action would be probably to put him into a forced coma and keep him under 24-hour care. Audrey shuddered at the thought. She wasn't willing to accept it. There's nothing else you can do? She asked. Surely there's some kind of cutting-edge treatment that's still in the trial phase. Just then, Kevin thought of something. Actually, there is, he said. With that, he had everyone's undivided attention, including Dr. Willow's. I was reading a scholarly article the other day about a medicinal plant that's been proven to slow the spread of brain cancer and, in some cases, even reverse the effects of brain damage. Audrey's eyes lit up with interest. Really? What is this plant? Can we get Lance into an experimental trial? Kevin reached into his satchel and pulled out the secret notebook given to him by the Night King. The plant is called the King Clone Creosote Bush, and lucky for us, it grows right here in California, just a few miles away in the Mojave Desert. After finding the correct page, Kevin held up the notebook for all to see. Other than having little yellow flowers, the bush looked like nothing one wouldn't find in a suburban backyard. It may look like an ordinary bush, Kevin said, but under the surface, it has roots that are so water-absorbent it's able to live in the desert for upwards of 10,000 years at a time. Because of this incredible ability to collect moisture, its roots are able to help rehydrate the brain and possibly repair holes, too. Dr. Willow nodded. Well, there you have it, folks. There's no guarantee it will work, but it sounds like the only option you have. With a desperate look in her eyes, Audrey turned to Kevin and asked, Would you please go to the desert and bring back some medicine, Kevin? I don't know who else to ask. Kevin nodded with an affirmative smile. Of course I will, Audrey. I'm very curious about this plant myself, so consider it a win-win. I'll head out as soon as I can. As dutiful as a lieutenant, Emo turned to Kevin and asked, Do you need me to come with you, boss? Before Kevin could answer, Madame Spatzel interjected. Oh yes, I'd love to come too, Kevin. Some of the best music in the world has been inspired by trips to the desert. Perhaps I might make contact with the desert muses myself. Kevin held up his hands and brushed off their offers. Thank you both, but you might be needed for Cleopatra while I'm gone. I'm going to call Jericho and see if he can come instead. Emo nodded. Sounds good, Kevin. Ready to get going? After assuring Audrey that they'd be back soon, Kevin and Emo walked out of the sympathy house, leaving Madame Spatzel to socialize. Before they got into the car, though, Kevin turned to Emo and said, Listen, Emo, the truth is I would have taken you to the desert in a heartbeat, but I've got another job for you instead. Inside, there's a man named Sergio who's the leader of the Stuntmen's Guild. He's extremely burly, so you can't miss him. Anyway, seeing him is always a sign of trouble, so I want you to follow him around and see what he's up to. Could you do that for me? Emo nodded with delight. Sure thing, Kevin. That sounds a lot more exciting than pre-production and office work. I'll call you if I learn anything suspicious. With that, Kevin got in the car and drove away to pick up Jericho while Emo hung back and waited for Sergio to leave the sympathy house. When he did, Emo crouched down and started to follow. After Lance passed out in the middle of a sympathy meeting, Kevin called Dr. Serafina Willow and projected her hologram into the room so she could examine Lance. Projecting Lance's image into an MRI machine back in Chicago, The scan revealed that Lance had holes in his brain, and the only course of action was a treatment derived from a plant in the Mojave Desert that had recently been proven to help reverse brain damage. Before leaving for the Mojave, however, Kevin instructed Emo to follow Sergio, the leader of the Stuntmen's Guild, who had been spotted at the sympathy meeting. After leaving the sympathy meeting, Kevin hopped in his car and picked up Jericho from the Radiance building in downtown Los Angeles. When Jericho got into the passenger seat, he buckled his seatbelt and gave Kevin a fist bump. "Hey, Kevin, how's it going?" he asked. "I assume I'm needed for some kind of adventure?" Kevin nodded his head as he pulled onto one of the crowded Los Angeles freeways. "That's right, Jericho. I'm not anticipating any trouble, but as you saw when we went to that Wild West movie ranch a few weeks back, you never know when a situation might escalate into something dangerous. That's why I wanted an experienced fighter at my side, just in case." Jericho was flattered. "Happy to oblige, Kevin. So where are we going?" Kevin tapped on the car's GPS and said, "We're going to the Mojave Desert to collect a sample of the king clone creosote bush. It's a bit of a long story, but in a nutshell, the roots of this plant have medicinal properties that can help reverse the effects of brain damage, and a friend of mine, Lance, the leader of Sympathy, desperately needs it as soon as possible." Jericho stroked his chin with a curious look on his face. "Sympathy, huh? Something about that place has always given me the creeps. The way those young women flock around Lance is just totally weird and unnatural." Kevin smirked. "I agree that some of the members go a little overboard with their affection for Lance, but all in all, Madame Spatzel seems to be gaining a lot from it, so I have to do what I can to help." After reaching a natural lull in the conversation, Kevin turned to Jericho and asked, "So what about you, Jericho? How's it going being a full-time Radiance member?" Jericho smiled as he remembered back on all of the training he'd already accomplished. "It's going fantastic, Kevin. Thanks again for the opportunity. I feel so much better about myself now that my fighting skills are being put to real use. Just last weekend, actually, a group of Radiance members and I stopped a bank robbery in Santa Monica. I haven't started leveling up yet, but I'm getting very close." Kevin was delighted to hear it. "That's great news, Jericho. Keep up the good work and you'll be a level 7 like me in no time. Besides, with your fighting skills, you're basically as powerful as a level 1 or 2 in the first place." Just then, Kevin's cell phone started ringing, and according to the caller ID on the screen, it was Emo. "Hold on, Jericho, I gotta take this," he said. When Kevin answered the call, Emo's voice came through the car speakers. "Kevin, it's Emo. I followed Sergio as you asked, and he led me to the studio. I don't have much time, but..." Just then, the call suddenly dropped. "Emo, are you there?" Kevin asked, but in response, all he heard was static. The call must have dropped. As Kevin turned his attention back to the road, Jericho sharpened his eyebrows. "You sent him to follow Sergio? Do you think he's all right?" Kevin nodded. "It seems like he just lost the connection," he said. "We'll give him a call as soon as we're back from the desert." Then Kevin threw on some music as he and Jericho headed further and further out of Los Angeles. As they began to leave the tall buildings and palm trees behind, California's desert landscape came more and more into focus. After passing one last suburban city, they turned down a 2-lane highway that led straight into the Mojave Desert. "All right, Jericho, keep your eyes peeled," Kevin said as they drove deeper into the Mojave. "We're looking for a thirsty old bush with yellow flowers." Jericho looked out the window and started scanning the terrain, but he didn't see any bushes that matched Kevin's description. Then, after a few moments of searching, Kevin pointed out the window and yelled, "Look, I see one. It's about a mile off the highway." Jericho was shocked that Kevin had such sharp eyes. "You can see the yellow flowers from here?" he asked. "I can't see a thing." Kevin chuckled. "I took a mental precision pill before we got on the road, so my vision is enhanced," he replied. "Ready for a bit of off-roading, Jericho?" When Jericho replied with an enthusiastic nod, Kevin turned the wheel and drove the car straight into the desert. A few moments later, after a bit of a bumpy ride, Kevin steered the car right beside the King Clone plant and parked. As soon as he stepped outside, the first thing he noticed was how hot the desert climate was. "Boy, it must be over 110 degrees out here," Kevin exclaimed. Jericho winced as beads of sweat began to roll down his forehead. "Yeah, well, that's what happens when you don't have the ocean around to cool you down." Without wasting any time, Kevin walked up to the king clone and started investigating. It's not the bush itself, but the roots that have the medicinal properties. It doesn't look like much, but this specimen is over 10,000 years old, if you can believe it. Before going any further, Kevin began to wonder what it might be like to communicate with a 10,000-year-old plant. Since I'm able to communicate with animals, I wonder if it would be possible to communicate with plants, too, he thought to himself. I can only imagine what kind of wisdom a plant this old might have in its DNA. Putting aside that thought for now, Kevin proceeded to take a sample of the plant. The last thing I want to do is harm or disturb it, so I'm only going to take enough to synthesize one pill for Lance. I'll also take just a little snippet so I can clone the bush for future use. Kevin didn't have to dig deep to find the roots. Just below the surface, he collected a small tangle of them, sealed it inside a plastic bag, and dropped it into a satchel. Well, Jericho, there you have it. There didn't turn out to be any danger after all, but I'm still so glad you tagged along. Jericho was slow to answer. With a trembling finger, he pointed to the horizon and said, "I wouldn't say we're out of the woods just yet, Kevin." When Kevin looked up, he saw a huge cloud of dust rolling towards them like a sandstorm. Jericho looked petrified. "I've never heard of a sandstorm happening in the Mojave Desert," he said. "Should we get back in the car and wait it out?" After sharpening his gaze for a better look, Kevin took a step back and slowly shook his head. "That's no sandstorm," he said. "It's a formation of motorbikes." Jericho couldn't see as far as Kevin, but when he squinted, he could see enough to tell that Kevin was right. Riding in flying cloud, kicking up a storm of dust behind them, there were about 50 people on motorcycles straight towards them. Kevin could hear them hooting and hollering as they revved their engines. It was a faint roar to Jericho, but Kevin's mental precision pill had heightened all of his senses, and he could hear their rumbling voices as the bikers neared. Sensing a fight coming, Jericho sighed and lowered his head. "I was wondering when these guys would make an appearance," he moaned. Without taking his eyes off the bikers, Kevin asked, "You know these people? Who are they?" "Well," Jericho said, "the Stuntmen's Guild is a huge organization with many different sub-factors within it. One of the factors is made up of performers who specialize in motorcycle stunts. They're like a gang, Kevin, and since they're heading this way, I'd prepare for a fight if I were you." As the motorcyclists got closer and closer, Kevin could hear that they were blasting heavy metal out of their speakers, disrupting the desert's natural silence. Finally, as the bikes neared, Kevin heard one rider yell, "Get ready, suckers! We're coming to take you down!" With only a few seconds until they arrived, Kevin had to think of a plan fast. "Come on, Jericho, get in the car," he said. "We don't stand a chance against these guys on feet." Then, just as Kevin and Jericho got into the car, the motorcyclists closed in and started surrounding them. "Where do you think you're going?" one of them shouted. "This party is just getting started." Kevin and Jericho went to the Mojave Desert to collect a sample of the king clone bush, whose roots could potentially heal sympathy leader Lance's brain damage. Along the way, Kevin got a call from Emo, who said he had followed Sergio to a studio. But before Emo could say more, the call dropped. Just after collecting a sample of the king clone, Kevin and Jericho looked up and saw a sandstorm heading straight towards them. Only it wasn't a sandstorm at all, but a faction of stuntmen who specialized in motorcycle riding. After getting into the car, Kevin quickly turned on the engine and slammed his foot down on the gas pedal. "Come on, Jericho, let's get out of here." Before they could get more than a couple yards away, though, one of the motorcyclists drove up alongside the car and slashed the tires. "Not so fast, Mr. Williams," the stunt performer cried out. "We're not done until we say we're done." Out of options, Kevin and Jericho had no choice but to get out of the car and confront the bikers head on. One of them, a biker with a helmet painted like a skull, revved his engine and pointed at Jericho when he saw him.
Well, well, well. If it isn't the traitor himself. Hello, Jericho. Starting to miss the guild yet?
In response to the bike gang leader's accusations, Jericho crossed his arms and scoffed.
I don't miss being in the guild one bit, he said. You're all just a bunch of thugs who sell out your muscles to the highest bidder. Haven't you ever considered putting your talents to good use before?
The bikers threw their heads back and laughed.
We're putting our talents towards the highest good there is, said the leader. Money. I want to make as much of it as humanly possible before I die.
Some things are better than money, Jericho replied. Having a clean conscience, for example, is worth far more than $100 million.
The lead biker chuckled through his helmet.
If it's between a clean conscience and a pile of money, I'll take the money every time.
Just then, before things got too heated, Kevin asked, "Who sent you? Why do they want me dead?" The lead biker just shook his head and clicked his tongue. It was hard to hear the sound of their heavy metal music.
That's none of your business, Mr. Williams. All you need to know is that the time has finally come for you to meet your end. Now enough small talk, let's get after them, boys.
Then the bikers revved their engines and closed in around Kevin and Jericho all at once. Assessing his enemies, Kevin saw that the bikers were armed with swords, spears, and lances, and one of them even had a flamethrower attached to his bike. Standing back to back with Jericho, Kevin raised his fist and said, "Get ready, Jericho. This isn't going to be easy." Kevin actually knew that the battle could be easy if he exerted all of level 7 powers in the fight, but there was no use in tapping into that resource if he didn't have to. He could sense that the bikers were all of a level 2 or 3, and though Jericho was just beginning his own leveling journey, this would be a good opportunity for him. Even with the numbers against Kevin and his need to reserve the depths of his level 7 powers, he knew that he and Jericho could outsmart and fight the biker gang. As the motorcycles charged forward, kicking up clouds of dust, Kevin leapt into action. With acrobatic grace, he dodged swinging swords and twirled around lances, using the desert terrain to his advantage. Jericho, putting his wrist training to use, met the onslaught with remarkable confidence, disarming with swift kicks and punches as they swerved past him on their bikes. "Looks like that Radiance training is really coming in handy," Kevin shouted as Jericho knocked another performer off their bike. Jericho looked back at Kevin and smiled.
This sure beats pretending to punch people on a movie set, doesn't it? Nothing can replace the real thrill of combat.
Amid the chaos, the skull-helmeted leader surged forward towards Kevin and Jericho with a lance at the ready.
You think you've tasted the real thrill of combat? You losers haven't seen anything yet.
As the lead biker sped towards them, Kevin jumped onto the back of another motorcycle and knocked off the rider with a well-placed kick. Seizing control of the bike, he scooped a lance off the ground and steered towards the leader, the two racing towards one another like speeding bullets about to clash. "You want a piece of me?" Kevin shouted.
"You don't stand a chance,"
the lead biker shouted back. Then, within a second of passing each other, Kevin's lance struck first and knocked the leader off his bike with a loud tumble. Kevin circled back for another attack, but before he could strike again, the leader knocked one of the other stunt performers off their bike and took it for himself.
"Sorry, chump, but I need this more than you do,"
he said remorsefully. In the next moment, Kevin and the lead biker were towards each other again, with their lances at the ready.
"I won't fail again,"
the leader muttered under his breath.
"This time, Kevin, you're mine."
Meanwhile, armed with a fallen sword, Jericho was parrying blows and striking back with a vengeance as other bikers swerved by and took a pass at him. The clash of metal against metal reverberated through the desert air. With a powerful spin, Jericho disarmed an opponent and sent him sprawling off his bike. When he looked around, Jericho saw fallen bikes littered all over the desert floor, but there were still plenty of them who were still mounted.
"Looks like we're about halfway through them," he shouted to Kevin.
As Kevin heard Jericho shout, he and the leader were gunning their engines and driving directly toward one another. Kevin held his lance at the ready, but only as a distraction, because he had something else in mind. Let's see how you handle this, he thought to himself. Then, just as their bikes were about to clash, Kevin dropped his lance and executed a daring jump, landing on the back of the leader's motorcycle.
Hey, what the hell are you doing?
The leader asked as he began to swerve his bike to knock Kevin off. However, Kevin's grip was too strong and he clung to the motorcycle with ease. Oh, just dropping in to say hello, Kevin said with a smirk. As the lead biker filled with rage, a fierce hand-to-hand struggle ensued as Kevin tried to wrestle control of the motorcycle. Having at least temporarily cleared the foes around him, Jericho sprinted toward the leader's motorcycle when he saw Kevin straddling the back of it. Then, with a powerful kick, he sent the skull-helmeted figure sprawling into the sand. With the grace of an acrobat, Kevin leapt off the bike, landed next to Jericho, and gave him a high five. Then he looked down at the lead biker and said, "And this time, stay down." His voice was fierce and assertive. Just then, the sound of the other motorcycle seemed to suddenly get much louder, and Kevin turned over his shoulder with a surprised look on his face. Why did the bikes just get so much louder, he asked. Did everyone switch them to turbo or something? Face down on the ground, the leader began to chuckle as he flipped himself over.
Those aren't the bikes,
he said with a devilish grin.
Take another guess.
Suddenly, something in the sky caught Jericho's eye, and when he looked up, his jaw dropped. Pointing up, he muttered, Kevin, are you seeing what I'm seeing?" When Kevin looked up, he saw 6 airplanes flying overhead in a diamond formation. Of skydivers jump out of the planes with parachutes on their backs. By the looks of it, all of them seem to be... Are those parachuters? Kevin asked. While Kevin was distracted, the lead biker got back up on his feet and prepared for more fighting.
You didn't think we'd come all the way out here without a little backup, did you? You've met the motorcycle faction of the Stuntmen's Guild. Now, Kevin, get ready to meet the aerial faction. Skydiving stunts doesn't perform themselves, As more and more skydivers fell to the earth like droplets of rain, the sky filled with colorful patterns as they pulled their parachutes. As they came closer into view, Kevin saw that they were all armed with swords and spears as well. Jericho held up his hands and prepared to fight. "Looks like things just went from bad to worse, Kevin?" Before Kevin could answer, the lead biker sprang into action and threw a punch. "You don't know the half of it,"
he yelled out in a fit of rage. Thanks to his lightning-fast reflexes, Kevin jumped out of the way just in time and counterattacked with a blow to the leader's temple. As the leader stumbled backward, Kevin turned to Jericho and said, "Get ready, Jericho. Things are about to get kicked up a notch." As the words left his mouth, the parachutes descended with a military precision that hinted at a well-coordinated plan. Boots hit the sand, and the bikers, fueled by newfound confidence, pressed on with the attack. Becoming encircled from above and below, Kevin and Jericho found themselves sandwiched between the relentless bikers and the disciplined paratroopers. Amidst the roar of engines and the clash of weapons, Kevin's agile moves and Jericho's brute force became a dynamic dance against the encroaching tide. "Didn't see this coming," Jericho grunted, fending off a particularly burly biker. "Adapt or be flattened," Kevin replied, his eyes scanning for an opening. For the next few minutes, the desert became a battleground, the whirling dust and clash of adversaries creating a cacophony of chaos. Despite the odds, Kevin's strategic mind kicked into overdrive. "Don't give up. We have to break their formation," he shouted to Jericho. Just then, with a thunderous roar, the lead biker shouted,
"Stop right this second, you two."
As the other stunt performers slowed to a standstill, Kevin looked up and saw the leader standing next to the King Clone Bush. Beside him, another biker had a flamethrower pointed directly at it. Kevin's heart dropped into his stomach when he put together what was happening.
"This dumb old bush is why you drove all the way out here in the first place, right? Well, surrender now or I'll burn it to the ground. If you don't surrender, I'll set flame to every other bush that looks like this in the entire desert," the lead biker yelled. Kevin was speechless. The only people who knew he was coming here to look for that King Clone Bush were at the sympathy meeting where Lance collapsed. And that meant Sergio and Helen O'Day were behind this attack.
Also, he thought the Mojave Desert was the only place in the world where the king clone bush was known to grow. If the leader burned them all down, thousands, if not millions of people would lose their chance to receive specialized treatment. And Kevin knew that he had to do something. No matter what, I can't let him burn down that bush, he thought to himself. After collecting a sample of the king clone bush's roots, Kevin and Jericho were attacked by an army of stuntmen on motorbikes, who were backed up by an all-women team of parachuters. Kevin and Jericho were mowing them down like grass until, all of a sudden, the leader of the bikers threatened to burn down the king clone bush unless they surrendered. With the burning tip of the flamethrower pointed directly at the king clone bush, Kevin had only a split second to decide what to do. The lead biker was far enough away that if Kevin were to try to stop him, he'd be able to burn the bush well before he could get to him. Completely out of options, Kevin threw up his hands and said, "Fine, we surrender, just please step away from the bush." Jericho looked surprised. "What are you talking about, Kevin? We can't surrender. These stunt people were hired to kill us."
"Not exactly," the leader shouted back. "We were given very specific instructions about what to do with you. Bring out the wooden stakes, boys."
Jericho's heartbeat increased when he saw two bikers drive forward with wooden stakes attached to their motorcycles. "Wooden stakes? And just what exactly do you plan on doing with those?" The lead biker threw his head back and laughed.
"Come on, Jericho. Use your imagination. I'm sure you've seen enough movies to know what comes next."
Then one of the parachuters approached Jericho with a pair of handcuffs. "Oh, God, they're going to handcuff us to the stakes and leave us out here to die, Kevin. We can't just surrender to this." Kevin had a difficult decision to make. Escaping the wooden stakes wouldn't be easy, but if they fought back now, the performers would burn the king clone bush, destroying 10,000 years worth of history. If there's a chance to save the bush, Kevin thought, I have to take it. Then he turned to Jericho and said, "Don't worry, Jericho. I've been in pickles like this before and I always find my way out. If it means saving the king clone bush, let them shackle us to these stakes. We'll figure out how to escape eventually." Together, the stunt performers started to laugh. "You'll die a hot and prickly death," one of them shouted. As the lead biker kept the flamethrower aimed at the bush, Kevin and Jericho stopped fighting and allowed the bikers to handcuff them to the wooden stakes. After propping them up in the dirt, they started revving their engines and hollering in excitement. Once they were all tied up, the lead biker pumped his fist in the air and yelled,
"A job well done, ladies and gentlemen. Our employer may even give us a bonus for this one."
As the crowd cheered and cackled with laughter, the parachuters jumped onto the back seats of the motorcycles and started driving away. Then, before leaving, the lead biker turned back and said,
"Oh, and one more thing before I forget."
With a menacing grin, he aimed the flamethrower at Kevin and Jericho and set the area around them ablaze.
"Let's see you get out of this one, tough guy."
Finally, as the flames started to rise, the lead biker got back on his motorcycle and joined the others riding off into the distance. Once they were gone, the desert was silent again except for the scorching sound of flames getting nearer and nearer. Like an island in a sea of fire, Kevin and Jericho were completely surrounded. As sweat began to pour down his face, Jericho looked at Kevin and said, "Well, Kevin, is this the part where you come up with a brilliant idea to get us out of here?" Kevin scanned their surroundings, desperate to find a solution, but all he could see were the flames growing higher and higher. "Well, the fire's a bit of a surprise, but I'm working on it," he shouted back. Kevin did have to admit to himself that this was a difficult situation. He had reserved his level 7 powers in the battle, knowing he didn't need to summon all of them to beat the bikers. But the lengthy fight and the addition of the parachuters had caused him a certain amount of exhaustion. He would have to rally himself via an herbal remedy or his moral fortitude to get Jericho and himself out of this ordeal alive. Even while his own life was at risk, Kevin still thought of the king clone bush first. Glancing past the fire, he was at least glad to know that the flames were a bit away from it. The bush is safe for now, he thought. But if we don't put out this fire soon, both of us and the bush are done for. In his head, Kevin scrambled to find a solution, but as the heat intensified, nothing came to mind. Then, in the midst of the chaos, he looked up and saw an unlikely figure. "Is that the Night King?" he asked under his breath. Sure enough, the Night King was standing just a few yards away beyond the flames. At first, Kevin thought he was totally real, but then wondered if he wasn't seeing a mirage. Either way, the Night King crossed his arms and said, "Be prepared, Kevin. This is going to sting." Just then, Kevin snapped his head backwards towards Jericho when he heard a scream. "Kevin, look!" Jericho shouted. "There are scorpions crawling all around us. One is making its way to my leg. I can't get stung, Kevin. I'm allergic." Kevin could hardly believe his eyes. All along the desert floor inside the ring of fire was a bed of agitated scorpions. As if things couldn't get any worse, he thought to himself. Staying strong for Jericho, Kevin turned to him and shouted, "The fire must have drawn them out. Don't worry, Jericho. I'll do my best to keep them away from you." Turning into his animal sensitivity, Kevin focused his mind on the scorpion and directed them to go after him instead. "You don't want Jericho. You want me. Come on over, little scorpions. There's plenty of me to go around." Responding to Kevin on an instinctual, unconscious level, the scorpions changed direction and started climbing up his leg instead. Kevin gritted his teeth in discomfort as he felt dozens of tiny legs crawling up his side. "Well," Jericho said, "thanks for turning the scorpions away from me, but that still leaves the life-threatening fire to deal with." Kevin was scanning every corner of his mind for a solution, but still hadn't arrived at one yet. "Like I said, I'm working on it," he shouted back. By then, the flames were just a few inches from Jericho's toes. "Well, could you work on it a little faster?" he demanded. Just then, like a bite from the devil, Kevin suddenly felt a sharp, stinging pain in his index finger. "Ouch! One of the scorpions got my finger." Kevin tried to swat away the other scorpions, but because his hands were cuffed, he didn't have much mobility. Then he felt another one sting his thumb, and then another and another, until he could barely feel his fingers anymore. At first, Kevin was horrified, but suddenly the numbness gave him an idea. "I have great news, Jericho. I've been stung by so many scorpions that I can't feel my hands anymore." Jericho looked over at Kevin with a face that was equally confused and terrified. "How in the world is that good news?" As Kevin answered, he began to fidget his wrists. "Because now that my hands are numb, I might be able to pull them out of the handcuffs." Trying to pull and tug his way out of the handcuffs, Kevin's wrists started bleeding, but thankfully he couldn't feel a thing. "I think I'm almost there," he said. "Come on now, just one last tug." Pulling with all of his might, the blood made Kevin's wrists quite slippery, and finally, he felt his hands slip through the cuffs. "I did it!" he shouted. For a moment, Kevin felt a burst of euphoria, but when he looked at his hands and saw how bloody they were, his jaw dropped. "Boy, I bet this is going to hurt like hell when the numbness is off. There's no way I would have been able to do that otherwise." Although Kevin felt a bit freer, Jericho was still in extreme danger. "We can celebrate later. For now, could you please help get me out of these handcuffs?" Kevin tried picking the locks with a needle from his satchel, but he wasn't able to break Jericho free. Then, all of a sudden, he remembered something that he hadn't used in a long time. "The night dagger," he exclaimed. "The blade is so sharp it can cut through steel." After producing the night dagger, which he always kept in one of his, Kevin got behind Jericho and cut the chain link of his handcuffs as easily as a string of thread. Full of relief, Jericho collapsed onto the ground and caught his breath. Now they were both free at least, but they were still surrounded by a ring of fire that was quickly encroaching. "The flames are too quick to run through, Kevin. We have to put out the fire somehow." Jericho was right. By the looks of things, they only had a few seconds or so before the flames would engulf them completely. Being in the middle of the desert, there was almost nothing around them but rock formations and cacti. But now that he had remembered the night dagger, the next idea came to Kevin naturally. "Hold on, Jericho. I have an idea." What we need is some water to put out the fire, and thankfully we're surrounded by cacti, which retain moisture better than almost any other kind of plant. Jericho tried to piece together Kevin's plan but didn't quite understand. Sure, the cactuses are full of water, he said, but we don't have any way of getting to it, do we? Kevin held up the night dagger and closed one eye for a better aim. Actually, Jericho, I think I know just how to retrieve it. Then Kevin summoned all of his energy and unleashed the halo technique, which seemed to give the dagger a life of its own. Twirling through the air, it rapidly shot from cactus to cactus like a fast-moving pinball, creating a splash of water each time it cut through one. Like any desert, the number of cacti in the Mojave was almost infinite, and as the night dagger cut through them like grass, water began to spill all over the fire until finally all that was left was a cloud of vapor. After it spun around for over a minute, Kevin called off the halo technique and the dagger returned to his hand like a homing pigeon. Like a cowboy, Kevin blew on the dagger's tip, twirled it around in his hand, and returned it to his pocket. Once again, the desert had fallen completely silent. You know what, Kevin? They ought to turn your whole life into a movie. Each day with you is more explosive than any action movie I've ever seen. Flattered, Kevin threw his head back and laughed. Trust me, Jericho, you don't know the half of it. With Kevin and Jericho tied to stakes, the stunt performers lit a ring of fire around them and left them for dead. As the fire spread, scorpions started to creep out of the earth, and when they stung Kevin's hand, his fingers went numb. Taking advantage of the numbness, Kevin forced his handcuffs and used the halo technique to cut through dozens of cacti at once. The cacti then gushed water onto the fire, which extinguished it. After catching their breath, Kevin and Jericho were finally ready to leave the Mojave Desert. Pointing to the horizon, Jericho said, "Well, there's the car we came in, but the stuntmen slashed our tires, remember? How are we going to get out of here?" At this point, they were so far off the main road that they couldn't even see it anymore. Scanning his surroundings, though, Kevin found a quick solution. "Look," he said, "we took out enough stuntmen that some of their motorcycles were left behind. Do you know how to ride one, Jericho?" Jericho shrugged his shoulders. "It's not my specialty, but how hard could it be?" he replied. Then, after flipping the bikes upright, Kevin and Jericho throttled their engines and drove out of the desert. Eventually, they found the main road and took it all the way back to Los Angeles. When they made it back to the city, Jericho went back to the Radiant Center and Kevin went straight back to the Sympathy Building to help Lance. When he arrived, Audrey greeted him at the door. "Wow, Kevin, you're back already. Did you find the bush you were looking for?" Kevin nodded and held up his satchel. "I've got a sample of the roots right here in my satchel. Now all I have to do is refine a pill out of it." Audrey looked a little concerned. "You still have to refine the pill?" she asked. "I'm sorry, Kevin, but we don't really have any herbalist equipment here." Kevin brushed off her concern with a dismissive wave. "Oh, I didn't expect you to have any lab supplies, but you do have a mortar and pestle, don't you? That's all I need." Audrey nodded and guided Kevin into the kitchen. There, he dropped the root sample into the mortar and crushed it into a powder. Then he scooped the powder into a capsule and showed it to Audrey. "Here it is," he said. "This particular powder loses its powers when refined with heat, which is ironic since it comes from a bush in the desert. Now all we can do is give it to Lance and hope for the best." Audrey nodded and gestured for Kevin to follow her. "Come with me," she said. "He's resting upstairs." Following Audrey upstairs to the master bedroom of the Sympathy House, Kevin saw Lance sleeping in a large white bed with a gaggle of flower girls crowded around him. By the looks of their red, puffy cheeks, Kevin surmised that they had not stopped crying since he left. Madame Spatzel was among them, and when she saw Kevin return, she stood up and said, "Look, everybody, Kevin's back. I've never seen him fail at anything, so I'm sure he'll be able to save Lance." Distraught with worry, the flower girl started clamoring around Kevin, saying things like, "Please, Kevin, you have to bring him back," and "Save him, Kevin. We're nothing without Lance to guide us." Their distress was becoming a bit overwhelming, so in a sharp and assertive tone, Audrey said, "Okay, ladies, clear out for a moment, would you? Give Kevin some space." As if Audrey were their drill sergeant, the sympathy members filed out of the room with pouts on their faces. Madame Spatzel was the last one to leave, and on her way out, she leaned in close to Kevin and whispered, "Please do all that you can, Kevin. Lance is so important to everyone here." Kevin nodded and patted her on the shoulder. "You know I always do my best, madam. Either way, we'll know Lance's fate in just a few minutes." Once the members had cleared out of the bedroom, Kevin handed the pill to Audrey, who forced it down Lance's mouth along with some water. After that, the suspense became so thick you could have cut it with a knife. After only a few moments of waiting, Audrey started feeling impatient. "Well, is it working?" she asked. Kevin pressed 2 fingers against Lance's neck and took his pulse. "His heartbeat is normal. We should take another brain scan to see what's going on inside his head." Without skipping a beat, Kevin pulled out his phone and called Dr. Serafina Willow with his state-of-the-art holographic projection technology. When Dr. Willow picked up, her holographic image was immediately projected into the bedroom. "Hi, Kevin. How's Lance doing? Have you already tracked down the King Clone Bush?" Kevin nodded. "Yes, and I've already refined the pill as well. We just gave it to Lance a few moments ago, but so far nothing's changed. Can we project him into your MRI machine for another brain scan?" "Of course," Dr. Will replied, taking a seat by the MRI machine. "Go ahead and project his image over to me whenever you're ready." Just like before, Kevin held his phone to Lance and allowed it to capture his image. Then he sent the projection to Dr. Willow, who loaded it into the MRI machine. A few moments later, Dr. Willow had a live scan of his brain displayed on her computer screen. By the expression on her face, things didn't look good. "I'm sorry to say it, Kevin, but the holes are still there. The King Clone Bush is a very experimental new medicine, so it was never guaranteed. Unfortunately, I think it's time we start considering our other options." As tears welled up in her eyes, Audrey took a deep breath and said, "I don't think Lance would approve of being in a coma," she said. "He wouldn't want to go on like this." For a moment, this looked extremely grim, but then all of a sudden Dr. Willow turned back to her computer and said, "Hold on a minute. I'm seeing some interesting movement in the prefrontal cortex." Then her jaw dropped. "What is it?" Kevin asked. "I can't believe it," Dr. Willow replied. "The holes in his brain, they're actually starting to heal themselves." Just then, Lance slowly opened his eyes and stirred awake.
"Huh? What's going on?"
he asked with a confused look on his face.
"Where am I?"
Overjoyed, Audrey threw her arms around Lance and started crying. "Lance, you're back! Oh, darling, what a miracle!" Surprisingly, Lance didn't hug Audrey back when she embraced him. Instead, he just looked terribly confused.
"Who are you?"
he asked. Then, with an even more disturbed look on his face, he asked,
"Who am I?"
Audrey looked back at Kevin and Dr. Willow with grave concern in her eyes. What's happened to him? Why isn't he back to his normal self? Kevin scratched his chin, giving the situation some thought. Thanks to the King Clone Bush and its hydration properties, most of Lance's brain matter is brand new, he said. It might take some time for all of the parts to reconnect, but hopefully after that, his personality should return to him. Lance looked at Audrey with a blank stare.
"Are you my nurse?"
he asked sincerely. Audrey shook her head and softly stroked his cheek. "No, my dear, I'm your wife, and the two of us love each other very much. You'll remember in time, but for now, why don't you get some rest?" Pulling Kevin aside, Audrey said, "Thank you for all you've done, Kevin. I think it would be too painful for the other sympathy members to see him like this, so I think I'll wait for his personality to return before I reintroduce him." Kevin nodded. "I understand, Audrey. It may take some time, but at least he's on track to return to normal. I've got some of my own business to attend to, so I should probably get going, but please keep an eye on Madame Spatzel for me, will you?" "Of course," Audrey said. "We're all very fortunate to have her as a member. She's become like a sister to me." After Kevin left the sympathy house, Audrey went downstairs and spoke with Madame Spatzel. She filled her in on Lance's situation, but asked her not to say anything to the other members until he fully became himself again. Then Audrey leaned in close and said, "You know, madam, the two of us should be working closer together, don't you think? If you'd like, you can start training with my improv troupe. I know you want to be a dramatic actor, but learning how to act comedically can really help to improve your overall range." Madam Spatzel was delighted. "I'd be honored to join your group, Audrey. Just tell me when and where you're meeting next, and I'll be there." Meanwhile, Kevin was walking back to his motorcycle, thinking about what he should do next. "Now that I've got some free time, I should probably get back to hunting down those other Lumiere brothers film reels, but I don't really have any leads," he thought to himself. Then, right as he hopped on the motorcycle, Kevin suddenly remembered the voicemail he received from Emo while he and Jericho were driving out to the desert. "Of course," he thought. "I'd get in touch with Emo and make sure he's all right." When Kevin tried to call, Emo's phone went straight to voicemail, and when he tried a second time, the same thing happened again. "Looks like his phone is off. That's unusual," Kevin thought. With nothing else to go from, Kevin opened his voicemail inbox and replayed Emo's message. "Kevin, it's Emo. I followed Sergio as you asked, and he led me to the studio. I don't have much time, but..." After that, the voicemail abruptly stopped. When he listened to it again, Kevin thought he could hear something in the background, but unfortunately it was too noisy to hear clearly. Scanning his mind for solutions, Kevin thought, "I know. I'll go and see the sound designers who worked on Chains of Desire. Maybe they can improve the sound for me." With a new plan in motion, Kevin throttled the motorcycle engine and drove over to Eminent Studios, where he was quickly let in through security. The sound department was located in the very back of the lot, and although it was getting quite late, Kevin let himself in through the open door. "Hello? Is anyone here?" he asked. But instead of a human response, Kevin heard a peculiar hissing sound. When he looked down, he saw a full-grown rattlesnake coiled up on the floor, shaking its rattle with aggressive intent. "Well," Kevin thought, "that's certainly not what I expected." Just then, as if triggered by Kevin's words, the rattlesnake opened its jaws, exposing its huge venomous fangs, and attacked. Returning from the desert, Kevin refined a pill from the King Clone bush to administer to Lance, and after a few minutes he stirred awake. With so much of his brain replaced with new cells, though, it would take some time for his personality to return. Kevin then listened to Emo's voicemail again and heard mysterious noises in the background, so Kevin sought the sound editors from the Chains of Desire short film to clear up the audio. However, when Kevin stepped into the sound building, he was attacked by a rattlesnake on the floor. Thanks to his lightning-fast reflexes, Kevin jumped out of the way just in time and dodged the rattlesnake's attack. Then, as Kevin backed away, a man with long, curly hair and a baseball cap came in through a back door with a nonchalant expression on his face. "Mr. Williams, what are you doing here?" he asked. Before Kevin could answer, the man in the hat suddenly noticed the rattlesnake and gasped. "Holy moly, there it is! I knew one had gone missing." With a quick, fluid motion, Kevin reached down and picked up the rattlesnake. Because he was holding it with his thumb pressed up under its jaw, it was unable to bite him. "Gone missing?" Kevin asked. "Does that mean there are others?" The man nodded. "Yes, we're auditioning different snakes for the sound effects in Cleopatra," he said. "There are a few ways to fake the sound of a rattlesnake, but nothing beats the real thing." Kevin would have asked another question about the sound effects, but he was more eager to stop holding the snake. "Well, where should I put it?" he asked. "Is there an animal wrangler on site?" The man in the hat shook his head. "No, we've got a whole cage of them in the recording booth. Come on, I'll show you." Following the man into the recording booth, Kevin saw a glass cage full of snakes. After opening the lid, he gently placed the rattlesnake back inside and then closed it again. The man in the hat smiled gratefully. "Thanks for that, Kevin. If you hadn't showed up, we probably would have had to call animal control or something. Anyway, now that that's over, anything I can help you with?" Kevin took a seat in one of the chairs behind the mixing board. "I don't think we've met before. You were a sound designer for Chains of Desire, weren't you?" The man nodded. "I sure was. Chains of Desire was one of the best projects I've ever worked on, by the way. The name's Nolan." Kevin reached out and shook Nolan's hand. "Thanks for the help, Nolan. The audio work on Chains of Desire was amazing. Anyway, I came by because I have a favor to ask. My friend left me a voicemail, but the background noise is difficult to hear. Do you think you could clear it up for me?" Nolan swiveled around in his chair and opened up some editing software on his computer. "I can certainly try," he said. "Go ahead and plug your phone into the computer and I'll download the MP3 file." After Kevin plugged in his phone, Nolan imported the voicemail into his editing window. Then, like a magician, he went to work. "Let's see," he said. "I'll just raise the treble a bit here, reduce the background static, increase the dialogue levels, and voila! Let's give it a listen." When Nolan hit play, Kevin noticed that the audio quality had improved drastically. "Kevin, it's Emo. I followed Sergio as you asked, and he led me to the studio. I don't have much time, but—" Emo's voice sounded the same, but in the background, Kevin heard someone yelling. "Can you lower Emo's voice?" Kevin asked. "I just want to listen to the background." Nolan made a few adjustments and hit play again. This time, Emo's voice was extremely soft, allowing the background noise to come into focus. "Following me, are you? It's time someone taught you to respect other people's privacy." Then, at the very end of the voicemail, Kevin heard a loud thud and immediately surmised that Emo had been attacked by Sergio. Nolan had a concerned look on his face. "Well, that doesn't sound good." With a burst of nervous energy, Kevin shot up from his chair. "No, it doesn't," he said. "It sounds like my friend is in danger. I need to rescue him ASAP." "Do you know what studio he's talking about? It isn't Eminence, is it?" Kevin shook his head. "No, I don't think so. I'll visit every studio in town if I have to." Turning to his computer, Nolan said, "There's no need for that. Here, I have some software on my computer that can trace where the call came from. Let me just run a quick diagnostic." After a moment or two, the GPS on Nolan's computer pinpointed an exact location. "It looks like the call came from the Warner Brothers lot. It's a shame what they're doing over there. Have you heard? They're bulldozing a bunch of historic film sets to make room for new office buildings. This town just gets more and more commercial by the second." Dark thoughts clouded Kevin's mind. A construction zone would be the perfect place to take Emo hostage, he thought to himself. "I need to get down there right away." Then, after taking back his phone, Kevin nodded at Nolan and shook his head. "Thanks for the help, Nolan. I never forget when someone does me a favor like this." Nolan smiled. "Any time, Kevin. Actually, if you have a second, I have a great movie idea I'd love to pitch you." Kevin shook his head and quickly ran out the door. "Sorry, Nolan. Another time, perhaps." Kevin hopped in his rental car and drove towards Burbank, the small city just next to Hollywood where the Warner Brothers lot was located. Meanwhile, Madame Spatzel was just beginning an improv workshop led by Audrey. Inside the small, dark theater, Audrey stood on the stage and dropped a large box in front of her feet. "Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. A lot of dramatic actors will tell you that improv comedy is a lesser art. But when you get right down to it, they are essentially the same. Whether it's for tears or laughs, all forms of acting are about getting into character." Then, with the audience's full attention, Audrey opened the box and showed them what was inside. "I call this the character box. Inside, you'll find all kinds of props and costumes, each with its own unique expression of character. For our first exercise, we are going to pick one item from the box and use it to invent a character. Who wants to go first?" Sitting in the front row, Ryder's hand was the first one to shoot up, so Audrey invited him onto the stage. Reaching into the box, he pulled out a prop sword and raised it high above his head. Then, channeling the spirit of a medieval knight, he lowered his voice and said, "The princess has been taken hostage by a terrible dragon. Of all the knights in 9 realms, I am the hero destined to save her." As Ryder swung his sword around, pretending to chop through an army of monsters, his performance garnered some laughs. Then Audrey returned to the stage and dismissed him, saying, "Very good, Ryder. The honorable young knight is one of the most celebrated archetypes in all of storytelling. Who'd like to go next?" Never one to shy away from a crowd, Madame Spatzel raised her hand next. When she reached into the box, she found a multi-jeweled necklace that glistened with vivid red, blue, and yellow gems. When she put it on, Madame Spatzel felt like the Queen of England. Speaking in a posh English accent, she pretended to wave a fan in front of her face and said, I haven't the patience to wait this long for my morning tea. Guards, when the servant finally comes, please kindly remove his head for me." The crowd erupted into laughter as Madame Spatzel trotted around the stage, loudly professing her love for things like little pastries, silk sheets, and voluminous dresses. Soon enough, everyone in the audience was cracking up except Audrey, who looked like she had tears welling up in her eyes. Sensing her distress, Madame Spatzel immediately stopped. "Are you all right, Audrey? Have I offended somehow?" Suddenly having everyone's attention, Audrey quickly wiped her eyes and pulled herself together. "No, I'm fine," she said. "Let's just take a quick break and pick this back up again in 5 minutes, all right? There are refreshments in the lobby." After putting the jeweled necklace back in the box, Madame Spatzel followed the others into the lobby and approached Audrey with an apologetic expression on her face. "Audrey, I'm so sorry if I made you upset," she said. Audrey shook her head and looked away. No, it's fine, madam. I don't know what came over me, but it wasn't your fault. I think it's just low blood sugar." As if she were in a rush to get away, Audrey left Madame Spatzel and started talking with some other members. Left alone, Madame Spatzel looked up and saw a wall of framed portraits. By the looks of it, the poor of people who had performed at the theater before. Some of them, like Will Ferrell and Robin Williams, were known stars, but the majority were of young up-and-comers. Scanning the walls with curiosity, Madame Spatzel saw someone who looked familiar. "Is that Hazel?" she asked herself. With a closer inspection, she saw that it was Hazel indeed, and bizarrely enough, she was wearing the same exact necklace that Madame Spatzel picked out of the character box. "Huh?" Madame Spatzel's face twisted with confusion. "Did that necklace once belong to Hazel?" she thought to herself. "And why did seeing me wearing the same necklace make Audrey cry?" Kevin played Emo's voicemail for a sound editor who was able to clear up the background noise. On a second listen, it was clear that Emo was in danger, and with some special software, they were able to pinpoint Emo's location to Warner Brothers Studios. Meanwhile, Madame Spatzel attended an acting workshop with Audrey's improv troupe. In the first exercise, Madame Spatzel put on a jeweled costume necklace which made Audrey very uncomfortable. Then, in the lobby, Madame Spatzel saw a framed photo of Hazel wearing the exact same necklace. Kevin was racing to the Warner Brothers studio lot as fast as he could. While swerving through traffic, he used a hands-free earpiece to call Jericho, who answered after just a few rings. "Hey, Kevin, what's up?" he asked. "Jericho, I've got a bad situation on my hands," he replied. "It turns out that Emo was attacked by Sergio after following him to the Warner Brothers lot. How soon can you be there?" Jericho answered without hesitation. "I'll leave right away," he said. "I still have that motorcycle we took from the desert, so I'll meet you there." By the time Kevin made it to the studio, Jericho was already there. After hopping off his motorcycle, Kevin's instinct was to barge through the gates, but Jericho grabbed his arm and stopped him. "Hold on a minute, Kev. Warner Brothers is famous for having the tightest security in town. We can't just rush in there without a plan or they'll never let us in." Kevin stopped to think. "Okay," he said. "We'll just have to pretend to be stuntmen then. Do you know the names of any movies they're filming right now?" Jericho scratched his chin. "Just one," he replied. "I heard they're filming a sci-fi movie about robots that take over the Earth. Apparently the working title is AI Armageddon." Kevin nodded. "All right," he said. "Then I guess we're here to do some stunts for AI Armageddon. Come on." With a newly hatched plan, Kevin and Jericho approached the gates, which were kept closed by a security guard in a booth. When he saw them coming, he said, "Badges, please." Kevin had to think of an excuse on the double. "Badges?" he asked. "Our agent didn't say anything about badges. She said to tell you that we're here to work on AI Armageddon and you'd let us right in." The security guard lowered his sunglasses and studied Kevin and Jericho closely. "You don't look like movie stars," he said. "What's your department?" "We're stuntmen," Kevin replied. "And we're already running late, so I'd appreciate it if you could let us in." The security guard shook his head. "Sorry, guys, but unless you got proof that you're a stunt, I'm afraid I can't let you through." Kevin and Jericho looked at each other and exchanged knowing glances. Then he turned back to the security guard and said, "Fine, if proving it is the only way, we'll prove it then." After taking a fighting position, Kevin lunged forward and swung an uppercut at Jericho's chin, missing by only an inch. Reacting as if he'd been really hit though, Jericho stumbled and fired back with a counterattack, which Kevin also reacted to as if it were real. Drawing on their mutual martial arts skills, Kevin and Jericho both knew how to put on a show. Exchanging blow after blow, their punches, kicks, and parries were swift and fluid. After seeing about a minute of it, the security guard raised his hand and said, all right, enough already, I get it. You guys are obviously stuntmen. Go on in. AI Armageddon is shooting on Soundstage 16. With the press of a button, the security guard opened the gates and let them inside. Kevin offered a thankful nod before stepping in. Thanks, sir. We'll be sure to bring our badges next time. Now that they were inside, Kevin had to track down Emo before it was too late. Nolan, the sound editor, told me that Warner Brothers is scheduled to demolish a bunch of old movie sets. If I had to bet, I guess that's where they'd be holding Emo. Having been on the Warner lot many times, Jericho knew exactly where to go. Follow me, he said. In the far corner behind the many sound stages, there was an entire backlot devoted to old movie sets. As they approached, Kevin began to recognize them left and right. Wow, it's the old house where they filmed A Day in the Life, Kevin exclaimed. And that's where they filmed the TV show Mr. Peepers. The back lot was massive, accommodating at least a dozen movie sets, some of which were constructed to look like entire city blocks. As they gathered their surroundings, Kevin sighed. Finding Emo is going to be like finding a needle in a haystack. I suppose the best course of action would be to split up and search separately, don't you think? Jericho nodded. Sounds good, Kevin. I'll go east and you can go west. Just then, before they split up, Kevin noticed something in the corner of his eye. Looking over his shoulder, he saw an enormous mansion propped up on a small hill, and in one of the windows he saw a small blinking light. Hey, do you see that? He asked. Jericho turned and squinted his eyes. Yeah, I do, he said. Looks like a twinkling star. As Kevin stared up at the window, he began to notice that the light wasn't blinking randomly at all, but in a very precise, rhythmic manner. Suddenly, Kevin put it together. It's Morse code, he exclaimed. Then he focused on the blinking and read the message out loud. It says, "Don't come any closer, Kevin. It's a TRAP, a trap." Without saying a word, Kevin and Jericho looked at each other in astonishment and started running towards the mansion. After bursting inside, they ran up the stairs and started frantically searching through different rooms until finally, they found Emo chained up to a support beam in the second-floor recreation room. In his hand, there was a tiny shard of glass which he was able to wiggle just enough to get the Morse code message out through the window. Emo was also gagged at the mouth, and when Kevin removed the gag, instead of thanking him, Emo seemed anxious and scared. Kevin, didn't you see my message? He asked. You shouldn't have come here. It's a trap. Kevin pulled out the night dagger and started to cut through his chains. I don't care, Emo. No left behind. That's a belief I live by. Before Kevin could finish freeing, loud footsteps approaching from behind. You should have listened to your friend, Kevin. Now that you're here, there's no way I'm going to let you leave here alive. Kevin recognized the voice immediately. When he turned over his shoulder, he saw Sergio, the leader of the Stuntmen's Guild, standing there with his arms crossed. I wouldn't expect you to know very much about friendship, Sergio, Kevin snapped back at him. Sergio threw his head back and laughed. Ha! You're right, Kevin. I'm not a very good friend. Do you want to know why? Friendship is the exact kind of thing that makes doofuses like you walk straight into a trap. I heard about what happened out in the desert, by the way. Nobody else seemed to think you'd be able to escape, but I guess I just know you a little better than that, don't I? That's why I kidnapped Emo as a precautionary measure. You made it real easy for me, too, by sending him after me like some kind of bumbling detective. It must have been really embarrassing for you to get captured so easily, wasn't it, Emo? Emo looked up at Sergio and glared. Don't listen to him, Kevin. Just get out of here now while you still can. Kevin shook his head. I'm not leaving you, Emo. I'd rather die than leave a friend behind. Sergio shot Kevin a devilish grin.
Well, if that's what you want, Kevin, I'm happy to oblige.
As Sergio darted towards Kevin with fists at the ready, a crew of 6 other stunt performers crashed in through the walls and took fighting stances. Hey, there's no need to destroy the set like that, Kevin shouted. Jericho chuckled as he threw his first punch. Hadn't you heard? It's scheduled for demolition. Kevin ducked out of the way at just the right moment. At the same time, Jericho performed a roundhouse kick that knocked one of the performers flat on their back. Ugh! She cried out as she hit the floor with a thud. Just then, with a high kick, another stuntman attacked Kevin fine, but luckily he parried the blow and countered with a swift punch that sent his opponent crashing into a vintage pool table, causing the cue balls to scatter like startled birds. Noticing the 8-ball drop in, Kevin chuckled and said, Not very good at billiards, are you? Meanwhile, Jericho seized a stuntman who was trying to knock him off his guard and launched him into a collection of antique wooden chairs. You look tired. Take a nap, Jericho exclaimed with a confident grin. Amid the wreckage, Kevin and Jericho seamlessly navigated the shifting battleground. When the fight spilled into the grand ballroom, the stuntmen, agile and relentless, began to leap over stacks of shattered furniture and swing from the chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. One of them made a daring leap towards Kevin but ended up injuring himself when Kevin sidestepped out of the way. With a nonchalant smile, Kevin said, Sorry you missed your target. Better luck next time. Meanwhile, Jericho, utilizing his strength, lifted a stuntman overhead and sent him crashing into an ornate mirror, shattering the glass into 1,000 tiny shards. Just then, Kevin vaulted over an antique piano, narrowly avoiding a flurry of kicks. Then, summoning all his strength, Kevin flipped the piano over and trapped a stuntman underneath it. It's time for your piano lesson, he said with a burst of adrenaline. All of a sudden, the low rumble of machinery interrupted the chaos. As Kevin, Jericho, and the other stuntmen slowly lowered their fists, they looked around for the source of the rumbling. What is that? Do you get? They asked each other. Before they could put together what was happening, a bulldozer crashed through the wall below them, its metallic jaws tearing into the mansion's foundation. Dust and debris erupted, shrouding the combatants in a haze. Looks like the demolition has just begun, Kevin thought to himself. If I don't save Emo in time, he'll get crushed under the rubble and die. I have to act fast. Without hesitation, Kevin sprinted back to the recreation room to save Emo before the bulldozers crushed him. Just when he was a few footsteps away, though, Sergio jumped in front of him and blocked his path.
We've got a little accident planned for Emo here, and I'm not about to let you get in the middle of it.
After learning that Emo's voicemail came from the Warner Brothers studio, Kevin and Jericho snuck past the guards at the gate by claiming they were stuntmen on a movie filming there. Once inside, they found Emo tied up inside a backlot set that was scheduled for demolition, but it turned out to be a trap laid by Sergio and the Stuntmen's Guild. A battle commenced that sprawled out all over the mansion set. But when bulldozers began to demolish the building, Kevin rushed to free Emo, until Sergio jumped in his way. Get out of my way. We both know the mansion won't stay standing for much longer, Kevin said with a stern look on his face.
You're right, Sergio replied. This building is going down, and you're going down along with it.
With no time left to negotiate, Kevin swung his fist at Sergio, but he sidestepped out of the way. Then he tried to retaliate with a punch of his own, but Kevin caught his fist in midair and struck back with a kick to the chest. As Sergio stumbled backward, Kevin sensed an opportunity to help Emo escape, but Sergio lunged forward before he could reach him.
Oh, no, you don't!
Just then, Jericho burst into the room and joined the fray. Together, they engaged Sergio in a flurry of kicks and punches. Meanwhile, down below, the bulldozer was eating away at the foundation of the mansion set, and it was quickly beginning to crumble. We're running out of time, Kevin exclaimed. We have to hurry up and get out of here. As whole rooms of the mansion set started to fall apart, Kevin's movements became more calculated. With a sweeping strike, Kevin kicked Sergio in the back and almost sent him over a ledge.
Whoa, that was close. I'll give you that,
Sergio conceded.
Not close enough, Jericho said.
Then, as Sergio struggled to regain his balance, Jericho delivered a thunderous blow that sent him tumbling down to the first floor.
Quick, now's our chance, he shouted.
With a burst of speed, Kevin ran back to Emo and used the night dagger to cut him free. Lifting him onto his feet, Kevin said,
"Come on, Emo. We have to get out of here."
As the mansion set's structural integrity teetered on the brink, Kevin, Emo, and Jericho made a hasty escape out the window. Just as they landed on the ground, the set collapsed behind them and the bulldozer rolled off to tear down another building. Danger averted, Kevin, Emo, and Jericho were finally able to catch their breath.
"Do you think Sergio and the others got out of there?" Emo asked.
Joe looked over his shoulder and surveyed the wreckage.
"Hopefully not," he said. "I don't see any of them anywhere."
Kevin, on the other hand, was more concerned with Emo than the fate of the stuntmen. "Never mind them," he said. "How are you feeling, Emo? Did they hurt you at all?"
Emo shook his head. "No, they only kidnapped me to lure you in," he replied. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I'm sorry I failed you, Kevin."
Kevin put his hand on Emo's shoulder and looked him straight in the eyes. "You didn't fail me, Emo. There's no way of predicting how and when these things happen. All that matters is that we help each other when they do." Emo smiled, moved by Kevin's words.
"Thank you, Kevin. I can't really fight like you and Jericho, but you know I'm always here to help however I can."
With a sense of accomplishment, Jericho put his hands on his hips and said,
"Well, now that that's taken care of, how about we hightail it out of here?"
Kevin agreed. "Sounds good," he said. On their way out of the back lot, Kevin, Emo, and Jericho passed a wall with a great sprawling mural on it. In part, the mural depicted a man in a suit sitting on the iconic water tower that loomed over the studio.
"Who's that?"
Emo asked. Kevin looked shocked that Emo didn't know. "That's Jack Warner," he said. "He and his 3 brothers were the ones who founded Warner Brothers Studio way back in 1923. He was a hard-hitting guy, but no one could deny his passion for the movies." Saying Jack Warner's name out loud, Kevin suddenly remembered something. When Kevin found the first Lumiere Brothers film reel, it was buried inside a hidden vault that belonged to Jack Warner. Maybe Jack owned more than one Lumiere Brothers film, he thought to himself. As the thought crossed his mind, Kevin remembered something else. According to a film history book published by his friend Lucia de Mello, which he read while flying between Chicago and LA, Jack Warner would often climb into the water tower for moments of peace and quiet self-reflection. "Before we go, I have to get into that water tower to investigate," Kevin thought to himself. "I know it's a slim chance I'll find any clues in there, but I have to check." Emo and Jericho turned to walk away from the mural, but Kevin stood firmly in place. "Sorry guys, but it turns out I'm not quite ready to leave yet. You go on ahead though. I'll see you back at the hotel, Emo. And Jericho, thanks again for the help." Emo and Jericho looked at each other and then back to Kevin. Neither of them wanted to leave.
"If you still got business here, Kevin, we can stick around and keep helping," Jericho said. Emo nodded. "Yeah, I agree. I've always wanted to see the Warner Brothers back lot anyways."
"All right," Kevin said, thankful for their friendship. "It's a shot in the dark, but I think there might be a clue I need to find inside the water tower. Maybe the 2 of you could stand below and keep watch while I climb up." Jericho raised a thumbs up.
"Sounds like a plan, Kev."
Together they walked over to the water tower, which stood over 100 feet off the ground. After a deep breath, Kevin said, "Wish me luck," and started to climb. It wasn't easy, but eventually Kevin made it all the way to the top, where he found a small latch that led inside. Opening it up, Kevin was shocked by what he saw. He figured the water tower would be empty, but inside there was a cozy space that looked almost like an office. The walls were lined with blankets, there was an old oak desk and a great big comfy chair to lay on, and there was even a bookshelf full of old scripts and a couple of Oscars. "Wow," Kevin thought to himself, "so this is where Jack Warner would come to unwind." After the shock wore off, Kevin started to poke around in search of anything that might lead him to the next layer of the secret Lumiere Brothers film reel. He had no idea that he was about to be in grave danger. Down below, Emo and Jericho were keeping a lookout when all of a sudden they saw a guard running towards them. "Uh-oh," said Emo. "We'd better get working on an excuse." Then, much to their surprise, the guard ran straight past them, followed by another and then another as if they were running to war.
"Hey, somebody stop that bulldozer!" one of them shouted.
Their eyes following the guards, Emo and Jericho immediately saw what they were talking about. Like a villain back from the dead, the bulldozer was charging right towards them at full speed. It wasn't Sergio behind the wheel, but Jericho recognized the driver as one of the other stuntmen. "Looks like he's gotten his second wind," he remarked. As the bulldozer sped towards them, multiple security guards tried to stop it but failed, and Emo was starting to panic. "It's heading right towards us, Jericho. If he knocks over the water tower, Kevin is done for." Emo cupped his hands together and shouted up top of his lungs, "You have to get out of there, Kevin. Trouble is on the way." But it was no use. The water tower was so well insulated that Kevin couldn't hear a thing and had no idea what was happening. Sensing a disaster coming, Jericho summoned his courage and deep breath. "Don't worry, Emo. I'll handle this clown." With a sudden burst of speed, Jericho sprinted in front of the bulldozer and leapt onto the roof with mesmerizing agility. When he heard a clamor above him, the stuntman pounded on the roof and shouted,
"Hey, get off of there! I've got a job to do!"
Jericho's face sharpened with fierce determination. "I've got a job too. I have to protect my friend." Then Jericho swung through the open window and grappled with the stuntman, seeking to regain control of the bulldozer. As it came closer and closer to the water tower, they engaged in a perilous struggle. Jericho's muscles strained against the manic determination of the stuntman, but then with an extraordinary feat of strength, Jericho overpowered the stuntman and kicked him out of the bulldozer just in time. Pulling back on the parking brake, Jericho slowed the bulldozer to a crawl only inches away from the water tower. Emo heaved a sigh of relief, but Jericho started to feel strange, as if his entire body was boiling with energy. Looking down from below, Emo was astonished to see Jericho's body emitting wave after wave of brilliant golden light. "Jericho, are you all right?" he asked. Jericho's hands were shaking as the energy running through him became more and more powerful. "What's happening to me?" he nervously wondered. After subduing Sergio, the stuntmen's guild leader, Kevin, Emo, and Jericho escaped the mansion set at the Warner Brothers studio just before it collapsed. Then they spotted a mural of Jack Warner, the founder of the studio, which reminded Kevin that Jack was known to spend time inside the iconic water tower on the backlot. Kevin decided to climb the tower to see if there were any clues about the missing layers of the Lumiere brothers film. He discovers a secret office for Jack Warner hidden inside the water tank. Below, Jericho and Emo fought off a rampaging bulldozer driven by one of the stuntmen, and when Jericho took control of the machine, his whole body started tingling with energy. Suddenly, the light around Jericho's body flashed so bright that Emo had to look away and cover his eyes. Afterwards, when Emo looked back at Jericho, his skin was still glowing for another few seconds until it finally faded, and everything seemed to return to normal. Emo was deeply confused. "What just happened?" he asked. Jericho was taking deep, heavy breaths. "I don't know, but I suddenly feel 2 or 3 times as powerful as I did before," he replied. "I think I might have just broken through to my first level." Emo was stunned. "Really? Congratulations, Jericho. I can't wait to tell Kevin." Meanwhile, with no idea of what just happened below, Kevin was investigating Jack's secret office inside the water tower. Next to the desk, there was a small cabinet, and when Kevin opened it, he saw a collection of props and antiques from old Hollywood, like a revolver signed by John Wayne and the iconic Rosebud sled from Citizen Kane. Kevin's eyes lit up like a pair of headlights. "Oh my goodness," he said to himself. "These old props are worth millions of dollars each. This must be the most priceless collection in all of Hollywood." Then Kevin saw something that really caught his eye. Is that the Maltese falcon? He wondered. In the back of the middle shelf, there was a small statue of a falcon that looked to be made of brass. When Kevin picked it up for a closer look, he thought, wow, this might be the most famous prop in the world. The Maltese falcon, the stuff that dreams are made of. Twirling the little statue around in his hand to study it from all angles, Kevin noticed something odd. Hang on a minute, he thought. According to Lucia's film history book, the original Maltese falcon prop was made of gray plaster. But this one appears to be made out of brass. Could it possibly be a replica? He wondered. Flipping the prop over, Kevin suddenly felt something rattle inside. To double-check, he gave the falcon a light shake, and indeed there seemed to be something inside. What have you gotten hidden inside here, Jack? Kevin wondered to himself. At first, Kevin was conflicted over whether or not he should break open the falcon, but when he remembered how important it was that he find his way to the upper realm, he decided it was the right thing to do. Summoning all of his strength, he slammed the falcon against the wall and shattered it to pieces. Then, among the broken bits on the ground, Kevin saw a miniature film canister and thought, oh my God, could it be? Lifting the film canister up to his eyes, he saw a thin piece of white tape that had Lumiere written across it in black marker. As soon as he saw it, Kevin's heart started to flutter. This is it, he yelled out loud. If Jack went through so much to hide it, what else could it be besides another layer of the secret Lumiere brothers film that leads to the upper realm? Kevin was overjoyed. Small enough to fit in his satchel, Kevin took the film canister, climbed out of the water tower, and began to make his way back down to eat. As he reached the bottom, the stuntman who hijacked the bulldozer was being dragged away by security. Speaking to Jericho, one of the guards said,
Thanks again for your help, mister. If we had lost the water tower, it would have been a national tragedy.
Jericho smiled and made a thumbs up. No problem at all, gentlemen. Glad to have been of service. Just then, Kevin hopped down from the water tower, startling Emo. Oh, Kevin, you're back. Find anything interesting inside the water tower? Kevin nodded. Actually, as it so happens, I found exactly what I needed. Then, noticing the bulldozer, Kevin asked, Did something happen down here? One of the stuntmen tried to bulldoze the water tower, but Jericho stopped him just in time, Emo replied. After that, things got a bit weird. What do you mean? Asked Kevin. Jericho took a step forward and said, After I dealt with the stuntman, my whole body started to glow and tingle with energy. Is that what happens when you level up? Kevin nodded with delight in his eyes. It sure is, he replied. It's a strange feeling, isn't it? Congratulations, Jericho. Jericho was pretty sure that was the case, but now that he'd heard it from Kevin, he knew for sure. As energy coursed through his body, he said, Wow, if this is what level 1 feels like, I can't even imagine how it must feel to be level 6 or 7. Thanks for putting me on the right path, Kevin. I feel amazing. Kevin smiled and patted Jericho on the back. No need to thank me, Jericho. You accomplished it all on your own, and I couldn't be happier for you. Anyway, are you ready to finally get out of here? After leaving the Warner Brothers lot, Kevin called a taxi to bring Emo back to the Beverly Hills Hotel, and Jericho went home to the Los Angeles Radiance building. Kevin, though, had more business to take care of. Driving his motorcycle to Lucia de Mello's house, he knocked on the door, waited for her to answer, and said, Lucia, great news! I think I found another missing layer of the Lumiere brothers film reel. With gleeful anticipation, Lucia let Kevin inside and ran to fetch her old-fashioned projector. Oh, that's just marvelous, Kevin. Let's take another look at it. I can't wait. As Lucia set up the projector, Kevin pulled out the 2 film reels and gently overlapped them on top of each other, combining them into one roll of film with a soft touch of glue. Then, when Lucia was finished, Kevin inserted the film into the projector and hit play. Lucia had a very excited grin on her face as she sat back and looked up at the screen. All right, let's see what we've got here, shall we? Just like before, the film began with opening credits that read, Viewer beware. Once you've gazed into the mystery of the upper realm, there is no going back. Then the movie began to play, but unfortunately, it wasn't quite as vivid as Kevin had hoped. This time, there were various background images behind the random squiggles. Every few seconds or so, the background would change, transitioning from a lofty mountain then to a 100-foot waterfall, and finally, an oozing river of lava. There was more to see than the last time he watched it, but still the film felt incomplete. As the reel came to an end, Kevin sighed and said, "Well, we have some new backgrounds, but still nothing in the foreground, meaning there must still be other layers out there I need to find." Kevin felt overwhelmed by the idea of hunting down more and more lost film reels. Back in Chicago, a projectionist told me that some filmmakers used to splice their films with 6 or more layers of footage. For all I know, there could be a dozen more layers to find. Lucia turned off the projector and looked at Kevin with a knowing smile. "Don't give up hope, Kevin. I've got some good news for you, actually. These old film strips appear to have been developed by Technicolor, and Technicolor never spliced more than 3 layers of film together. One's for red, blue, and yellow. It was an early attempt at color film. Long before the public saw color, the founders of Hollywood and the film industry were experimenting with it." Kevin looked up at Lucia with relief in his eyes. "So you mean there's only one left that I have to find?" he asked. Lucia nodded. "And even better than that, I think I might know where to find it too." Walking over to her kitchen table, Lucia picked up an envelope and handed it to Kevin. Inside was a formal invitation to the grand opening of a new exhibit, Academy Museum of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Written in big bold lettering, it said, "We invite you to attend the grand unveiling of our newest exhibit featuring a never-before-seen film reel produced by the Lumiere brothers." Kevin looked up at Lucia with shock and surprise on his face. The Academy Museum is going to display a lost Lumiere brothers film reel? Well, in that case, I'll definitely have to attend the grand opening. Lucia looked unsure. "I don't know, Kevin. The invite list is pretty tight, and if you hadn't noticed, the event is being presented by Atticus Davel, who I don't think you have the best relationship with." Kevin shook his head, unbothered by the obstacles in his way. "I don't care what it takes," he said. "I have to find a way in." After finding another Lumiere Brothers film reel inside a replica of the Maltese Falcon, Kevin climbed down from the Warner Brothers water tower and congratulated Jericho for breaking through to his first level. Afterward, Kevin screened the Lumiere Brothers film with film historian Lucia, but again the reels were incomplete. Lucia informed him he only needed one last strip of film, and she knew exactly where to look. The Academy Museum was about to unveil a new exhibit featuring the never-before-seen Lumiere Brothers film reel. While Kevin considered ways to get on Atticus Davel's guest list for the Academy Museum Gala, Madame Spatzel was becoming more and more curious about what happened to her friend and fellow sympathy member, Hazel. The night before, while attending Audrey's acting workshop, she had seen Hazel's photograph hung up on the wall, and Hazel was wearing a necklace that clearly made Audrey uneasy. Becoming concerned, Madame Spatzel had to know more, so the next morning she approached the front desk at the Beverly Hills Hotel and said, "Excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you, but I was wondering if you had heard anything from Hazel, the housekeeper who used to work here?" The concierge looked up from his computer with an uncomfortable expression on his face. "Ah, yes, the young aspiring actress. We tend to see a lot of them around here. I'm afraid that she took off without a word, unfortunately. That also tends to happen a lot." Madame Spatzel, desperate for even the smallest clue. "Really? She didn't say anything about where she was going?" she asked. The concierge shook his head. "I'm afraid not, madam. She didn't show up for her shift some time ago, and a few days after that, we went ahead and took her off the schedule. I'm afraid there's not much information I can provide other than that, but if I can be of any other kind of assistance, please don't hesitate to let me know." Just then, Madame Spatzel's cell phone started to ring. Glancing down at her caller ID, she saw that it was Felicity Dufour, her agent. Answering, she said, "Hello, Facility. How's it going?" "Hello, madam," Felicity said. "Did you get my email? I'm sorry for the rush, but you have to get down to the SAG building ASAP. We need to register you as a member before we can start filming for Cleopatra." Madame Spatzel looked a little confused. "SAG?" she asked. "What's that?" Felicity was surprised she had to ask. "What's SAG?" Why, it's the Screen Actors Guild, darling. Anyone who is an actor is a member. Well, in that case, I better get down there, Madame Spatzel replied. Felicity had one more request from her client. And madam, I've told you before, it's Felicity, not facility, she said. Tongue twisters, yelled Madame Spatzel and promptly hung up. She then got a taxi from the lobby and went to the SAG headquarters on the world-famous Wilshire Boulevard. Walking up to the front desk, Madame Spatzel said, Yes, hello? I was told to come here and register to become a member. The young woman behind the counter looked up at Madame Spatzel with an overly bright and cheery demeanor. Hi, I'm Sadie. Are you an actress? She asked eagerly. Madame Spatzel was surprised. Do you not recognize me, Sadie? Madame Spatzel, star of Chains of Desire? Sadie gasped and her eyes went wide. Oh yes, Madame Spatzel, of course I've seen your film. You're a true inspiration to me. I'm an aspiring actress myself. I even downloaded some of your songs, but when I listened to the one called Sandpaper Kiss, my boyfriend heard it and instantly left me and said I needed therapy. Madame Spatzel was exhilarated, but waved Sadie off. You don't have to thank me. Just keep listening and watching my films. Now where do I sign up for the SAGI group? Sadie handed Madame Spatzel a clipboard and said, It's just SAG, and we need your signature here and your initials here, here, and here. Madame Spatzel signed the document without hesitation. All right, is that it? She asked. Sadie shook her head. Well, before you become a member, you'll have to pay your dues to the guild. Madame Spatzel looked almost offended. Pay my dues? She asked. I have been paying my dues my entire career. Do you know how long I've been working to become a star? Sadie cleared her throat and chose her next words carefully. I think you may have misunderstood me, madam. To be a SAG member, you must pay an annual fee of $10,000, starting now. Madame Spatzel shrugged. Oh, she said as she pulled her wallet out of her purse. Well, in that case, you can just put it on my credit card. With all the money Kevin paid her to star in Chains of Desire, $10,000 was hardly a problem. After swiping her credit card, Sadie smiled and said, All right, you're all set. Welcome to the guild, Madame Spatzel. Madame Spatzel smiled politely. Oh, thank you very much, Celine, she said, getting the girl's name wrong. Just as Madame Spatzel was about to leave, she had an idea. Turning back to the front desk, she said, Before I go, I was wondering if you had any records of a friend of mine. Her name is Hazel, and she's also an aspiring actress. Pale 20s, perhaps she appeared in an improv comedy. With a quick search, Hazel's file came right up on the computer. Hazel Halifax? She asked. Madame Spatzel nodded. Yes, that's the one. Is she in the system? Sadie nodded back. Yes, it appears that she joined SAG last year. Madame Spatzel's energy level increased immediately. Oh, fantastic, she said. I have a package I've been meaning to ship her for ages. Would you mind giving me her address? 456 North Appleby Lane, Sadie replied. Hope that helps. We'll see. By the way, if you liked Sandpaper Kiss, you should listen to Meat Sauce. Madame Spatzel gave Sadie a wink and headed out to call another taxi. 456 North Appleby Lane, she told the taxi driver. Maybe now I'll finally get some answers, she thought. The taxi dropped her off outside a huge mansion that overlooked all of Hollywood, all the way out to the coast in the island of Catalina. This couldn't possibly be Hazel's house, could it? Did she really live in a mansion this huge? As she approached the front door, she noticed that the numbered address appeared incorrect. Wait a minute, she said to herself. This mansion is 455 North Appleby Lane, not 456. Then, as she looked around, she saw a little side gate with an address of its own. There it is, 456. The side gate was open, so Madame Spatzel looked both ways to make sure the coast was clear, and then let herself inside. Beyond the gate, there was a pebble walkway that led to a guest house in the backyard. This must be it, she said to herself. Gently twisting the knob, Madame Spatzel saw that the door was unlocked and stepped inside. Right by the pool, the guest house was a one-bedroom, one-bath with a spacious living room in between. Like so many other young aspiring actors, Hazel's home was covered with old posters from the golden age of Hollywood. As she looked around, she saw set out on the table, confirming beyond a doubt that she was living there. "I wonder who owns the main house," Madame Spatzel wondered to herself. Just then, she heard the door open behind her.
"Who are you? What are you doing here?"
a man's voice asked. When Madame Spatzel turned around, they both recognized each other instantly. "Milo?" she asked. Milo Hardy looked stunned.
"Madame Spatzel? What are you doing in my guest house?"
"Your guest house? You live here?" Madame Spatzel asked. Milo shook his head.
"No, of course not. I live in the main house, so I repeat, what the hell are you doing here?"
Madame Spatzel didn't want Milo to know what she was really up to, so thinking on her feet, she quickly changed her demeanor, switching to an almost entirely new personality. With a deep, sultry voice, she said, "I'm sorry to surprise you like this, Milo, but I just had to see you. I haven't been able to get you off my mind for weeks." Then, in a daring move, Madame Spatzel leaned in and kissed him, leaving him completely speechless. "Our chemistry was just electric when we performed together on Chains of Desire. When we begin filming Cleopatra soon, you absolutely must be the one to play Mark Antony." Milo's cheeks were redder than apples. All he could muster out was, "I thought Ryder was going to play Mark Antony." Madame Spatzel shook her head and playfully poked his chest. "Not on my watch, he isn't. It has to be you, Milo. I won't accept anything else." Completely flattered, Milo leaned in for another kiss, but Madame Spatzel abruptly turned her cheek. "Anyway," she said, "what a lavish guest house you have here. A little small for my taste, but for a lesser star it would be just perfect. Is anyone living here at the moment?" Milo shrugged his shoulders.
"Well, yes and no. Technically, a girl named Hazel is living here, but I haven't seen her in a few days. I think she must have left town or something."
Madame Spatzel acted surprised. "Oh, yes, I've met Hazel before. She's a member of Sympathy just like me. Do you have any idea where she might have gone?"
Milo shook his head. "No, but if she doesn't come back soon, I'm going to have to start renting the place out to someone else. You met her at a Sympathy meeting, huh? I'd stay away from that place if I were you."
Madame Spatzel was eager to hear more. "Really? Why is that?" she asked. Milo sat down on the sofa and let out a heavy sigh.
"Do I really have to tell you? Because it's a scam, that's why. Their business model is to attract a bunch of young, insecure actors promising to help them with their careers. But the deeper you fall into it, the more cash they ask you to cough up for nonsense classes, workshops, seminars, you know the drill. I left as soon as I caught wind of their extortion, reported them to the police, and got the old leader, the one before Lance Reeves, thrown in jail. The police couldn't get him for extortion, but they were able to audit him and arrest him for tax fraud."
This perspective on Sympathy was brand new to Madame Spatzel, but as she reflected back on her experience with them so far, she could see Milo's point. She opened her mouth to say something, but then Milo continued.
"The worst part is I lost my ex-girlfriend to Sympathy. She used to have such potential, but as she fell deeper into their cult, all she wanted to do was wear flowers and dance around Lance. I haven't seen her since."
Madame Spatzel was curious to learn more about this original leader of Sympathy whom Lance replaced. "If I talk with the original leader," she thought to herself, "maybe he can tell me something about what might have happened to Hazel. Where can I find this original leader?" she asked. Meanwhile, across town, Kevin had just finished explaining his current predicament to his allies back at the Beverly Hills Hotel. "So basically, long story short, I need a way into this gala at the Academy Museum, but because it's funded by Atticus Davel, there's no way I'm on the guest list." Emo scratched his chin. But because this Lost Lumiere Brothers film reel is so important, I can see why you have to get in anyway. Do we know anyone on the guest list?" he asked. Kevin shrugged his shoulders. "I'm not even sure where to look," he said. There's no way that Atticus would ever share the guest list with us. Just then, Kevin remembered how his good friend Olivia was at internet research and gave her a quick call. "Hi, Olivia? I've got a quick favor to ask you. The Academy Museum is hosting the grand unveiling of a new exhibit this weekend, and I was wondering if you could track down the guest list for me. If it wasn't already obvious, I wasn't invited." Conveniently, Olivia was already sitting in front of her computer. "Sure thing, Kevin. Let me poke around and see what I can find." A few moments later, Olivia said, "Oh, here we go. I found something. It's a pretty huge list, Kevin. There must be over 100 names on here." "Well," Kevin said, "is there anyone we can network with? Someone from Williams Media, perhaps?" Olivia fell silent as she scrolled down the list. Then, with a burst of positive energy, she said, "Here's a name I think you might recognize. Madame Spatzel." Hearing Olivia over the speakerphone, Emo, Sandra, and Adriana all looked at each other and smiled. "Well, I suppose we just found our way in. Thanks, Olivia." After hanging up the phone, Kevin quickly dialed Madame Spatzel's number, but she didn't pick up. Kevin thought to himself. I wonder what she's up to.